At first, building a business together seems ideal. There's trust, less risk of betrayal, and profits stay within the family. However, what happens when a small venture rapidly expands into a multi-million or multi-billion-dollar empire? The case of Andreen was complicated and unsettling. She went missing from her own home, and few believed she was still alive. However, without a body or strong evidence against the suspect, the investigation stalled. Months went by with no progress. The suspect seemed likely to go free. Just when it seemed all hope was lost, a local rancher made a shocking discovery that changed everything. Andreen McDonald, born Anderson, was born on September 23, 1989, in Port Antonio, Portland, Jamaica. Her parents were Jamaicans who immigrated to the United States. She is the second of 3 daughters. Known for her friendly nature, charm, and good looks, Andreen had many friends and received a lot of admiration. While in high school, Andreen formed a close friendship with Andre McDonald. Andre was also born and raised in Jamaica. He was the only child of Marina and Everton McDonald. His parents eventually separated while Andre was still in school, and his father moved to the United States, where he remarried another woman. In the early 2000s, Andre moved to Florida to live with his father. He attended the International Technical University and earned an engineering degree. Instead of following a career in engineering, he chose to enter the military, signing a contract and serving in the U.S. Armed Forces. Throughout his military service, Andre and Andreen maintained regular contact through calls, messages, and visits whenever he returned to Jamaica to see his mother. Their relationship deepened over time, evolving into a meaningful, long-term partnership, and they realized they couldn't imagine life without each other. After graduating high school, Andreen moved to the United States to be with Andre. About a year later, they had a small wedding with only their closest family and friends. Shortly after their marriage, Andre was transferred from sunny Florida to Lackland Air Force Base in San Antonio, Texas. He quickly began planning for their future, and Andreen enrolled at the University of Texas to pursue a degree in economics. In 2013, they welcomed their daughter. Around the same time, they started a business by opening their first. The assisted living is called Starlight Homes. The venture quickly gained popularity, leading them to open a second facility in another city soon after. Within a few years, their network of assisted living was generating substantial income. While Andre continued his military career and traveled frequently for work, Andreen took charge of managing their multi-million-dollar business's daily operations. They purchased a beautiful home with a pool in an upscale neighborhood in Behar County, owned several luxury vehicles, and planned to expand their business into nearby states. In 2016, after her father's passing, Andreen brought her mother from Jamaica to live with them. Her mother helped around the house and cared for their daughter when both parents were busy. A few years later, they bought her a small, comfortable house nearby and gifted her a personal vehicle. In early 2019, 37-year-old Andre, a major in the U.S. Air Force, chose to move to the reserves. He wanted to stay in San Antonio to spend more time with his family and get more involved in their flourishing business, easing the workload for his wife, Andreen. Their company, which consisted of a network of assisted living facilities, was thriving and had grown across the state to be worth nearly $1 billion. From the outside, the McDonald family seemed to have it all: success, wealth, a bright daughter, and a successful business. However, beneath this facade of prosperity, tensions were starting to rise, issues unknown to most people. On Friday, March 1, 2019, 29-year-old Andreen did not show up for work, and her phone was turned off. This was very unusual for her. Concerned, her assistant and close friend, Carol, reached out multiple times but couldn't get in touch. Eventually, Carol and 2 colleagues decided to visit the McDonald home to check on Andreen. After knocking for a long time without an answer, Carol refused to leave and began walking around the house to investigate. In the backyard, she discovered something troubling: a charred spot with a zipper partially sticking out of the ashes, suggesting someone had been burning clothes. But who would do such a thing, and why? Nothing else appeared suspicious from the outside. When Carol pulled on the back door and found it unlocked, she stepped inside cautiously. She called out for Andrine and Andre but got no response. The house was eerily quiet, as if they had just stepped out. In the bathroom, she spotted odd streaks on the light switch that appeared to be dried blood, along with dark stains on the floor that raised alarm bells. Carol recorded her observations on her phone and contacted the local authorities to report her findings. Officers arrived quickly and began searching the home. Their discoveries heightened the concerns. The carpet in the master bedroom had been scrubbed with a strong industrial cleaner, leaving a lingering chemical smell. There were faint blood spots on the floor and a smear on the doorframe. Detectives thought this could be the scene of a serious crime, but the minimal blood left some hope that Andrine might be alive. Andre was unreachable by phone, and his location was unknown. Initially, the whereabouts of their daughter were also uncertain, but authorities soon confirmed she was safe at her paternal grandmother's house. All three of McDonald's vehicles were present, two were parked outside and the third, a Chevrolet Malibu, was in the garage. The car caught the officers' attention because it was covered in dust, indicating it had likely been on dirt roads recently, with small gravel stuck in the tires. Although there were no clear signs of damage or blood, the state of the car raised suspicions. While investigators were still inspecting the house, the homeowner, Andre, suddenly appeared at the front door. He appeared anxious and confused about the police presence on his property. When questioned about his whereabouts and what had happened, Andre stated that he had spent the night looking for his wife. He mentioned several hospitals he had visited to check if Andrine had been admitted. A follow-up confirmed that Andre had indeed gone to those hospitals. Additionally, at one of the hospitals, when the staff mentioned that someone with the last name McDonald had been checked in, Andre reportedly turned pale, stepped back, and quickly left without realizing it was just another person with the same last name. From the beginning, Andre's actions raised red flags. The officers decided to question him to hear his side of the story. Andre explained that he and Andrine had a domestic argument, so he left the house to calm down. When he came back, she was not there. He mentioned that he tried calling her multiple times, and when she didn't answer, he took their daughter to his mother's house and kept looking for Andrine. It was hard to track his movements because his phone had been turned off since the night before and stayed off until he returned. When the officers asked why his phone was off, Andre changed his demeanor and said he wouldn't answer any more questions without a lawyer. At that point, investigators realized something was off. However, without strong evidence, they had to release him after the first interview. He was given a travel restriction order and placed under discreet surveillance at his home. It was later revealed that on the same day Andrine went missing, he had made several concerning purchases at different hardware stores. He paid in cash for items such as a shovel, large heavy-duty trash bags, a small hatchet, work gloves, duct tape, and fire starter fluid. Andre seemed to be trying to leave no trace by keeping his phone off and not using a credit card. Nevertheless, law enforcement tracked him down using security camera footage from those stores. Meanwhile, forensic testing confirmed that the blood found at the home belonged to Andrine. As suspicions intensified, the police decided to detain Andre for further questioning and obtained a warrant to conduct a comprehensive search of his home, including the seizure and examination of all digital devices. During a brief period when he went missing, Andre returned home but left almost immediately, unaware that officers were tracking him. He stopped at a gun shop, where he bought a large-caliber handgun and a substantial amount of ammunition, paying in cash. Strangely, after completing the purchase, he turned and walked out of the store, leaving the firearm and ammunition on the counter. His demeanor appeared disconnected, his eyes were vacant, and his movements erratic, suggesting a loss of touch with reality. However, experienced officers suspected this behavior was an act, possibly a prelude to a future defense claiming mental instability. Andre was arrested as he exited the store, and he did not resist. Formal charges were filed against him. During a physical examination, investigators discovered fresh scratches on his hands and forearms, which appeared to be fingernail marks. Although Andre could not provide a clear explanation for these injuries, those present recognized the likely cause, a struggle. Nearly 48 hours had passed since Andrine was last seen. The increasing circumstantial evidence made it hard to believe she might still be alive. A large-scale search effort was launched, involving law enforcement, volunteers, and hundreds of concerned citizens. Teams searched the areas around San Antonio, particularly the rural parts of Bexar County, hoping to find clues to advance the investigation. Sadly, they found nothing useful, neither in the fields, wooded areas, nor urban zones. Even a thorough examination of the digital devices taken from the home, including a phone and tablet, did not produce any promising leads. However, when investigators conducted a second, more thorough search of the vehicles and garage, the case changed dramatically. They found newly purchased tools and supplies that matched items Andre had bought at several hardware stores. Then, in the trunk of Andre's Porsche Macan, they discovered a shovel wrapped in plastic. The shovel had strange dark stains on it and several long strands of hair attached to it. Forensic analysis confirmed that the blood and tissue on the shovel matched Andrine's DNA. The hair strands were also hers. However, the handle had been wiped clean of fingerprints. When questioned, Andre claimed he had never seen the shovel before and suggested that someone must have planted it in his car. Despite the growing evidence against him, Andre posted bail, set at $2 million, which he paid immediately, allowing for his swift release. Once home, he did not join the ongoing search for Andrine. He maintained his story that they had an argument, he left to calm down, and when he returned, Andrine was missing. Andre claimed he tried to contact her afterwards, sending both voice and text messages. Some of these messages, which were found on his phone, contained emotional appeals, telling her their daughter was crying and urging her to come home. All of these messages were sent around midnight, after which his phone was turned off again. As the investigation into her disappearance continued without any leads, detectives decided to look into the McDonald family's background. They quickly discovered that their seemingly perfect relationship was misleading. In reality, their marriage was under significant strain for quite some time. Although they had built a successful business together that was growing rapidly and generating good income, most daily operations were handled by Andrine, especially while Andre was serving in the military. During Andre's 6-month deployment in Alabama in 2016, their emotional distance increased. Just before he was scheduled to return home, Andrine messaged him suggesting that they should go their separate ways and that he didn't need to come back. When Andre returned, he found out that while he was away, Andrine had begun a relationship with other man, Aubin Hall, whom she had known since her childhood in Jamaica, also her ex-lover. She even has a tattoo on her arm that is the letter A, the first letter of Aubin's name, which she says was a mistake of her youth. Aubin and Andrine reconnected during one of Andrine's visits to Jamaica, leading to a rekindling of their relationship. He started visiting her in Texas, and they decided they wanted to be together, prompting Andrine to file for divorce. Under Texas law, Andrine and Andre were required to divide their assets and business equally, which caused significant disagreement between them. Andrine felt entitled to a larger share because she managed the operations, while Andre argued that everything belonged to him since he had funded the initial startup. About 6 months later, the divorce proceedings were put on hold as they appeared to have reconciled, deciding to give their marriage another chance for the sake of their young daughter. However, despite this outward appearance of stability, underlying tensions remained. Andre had consistently opposed Andrine's trips back to Jamaica because he knew she would meet her former lover, leading to ongoing conflict between them, but Andrine continued to make her own decisions. Carol, Andrine's closest friend and the first to alert authorities after Andrine's disappearance, described Andre as controlling, manipulative. He believed that the business, their home, and even Andrine herself were his possessions, citing that he had brought her to the U.S., helped her gain citizenship, paid for her college education, and financed their first assisted living. Shortly before she went missing, Andrine confided in Carol, saying, "If anything ever happens to her, just know it was Andre." Just 2 weeks before Andrine disappeared, Andre found out that she had secretly registered a new company in her name and moved part of their shared assets into it. This discovery likely felt like a betrayal and may have contributed to the tensions between them. On July 11, 2019, 4.5 months after Andrine went missing, a local farmer named Clifton Clavin was walking on his property on the outskirts of San Antonio. Since the land was only partially cultivated, some areas had become overgrown. While surveying the grounds for future maintenance, Clifton noticed a strong, unpleasant smell that seemed to be related to decomposition. Assuming it was the scent of a dead animal, he followed it, intending to bury or remove whatever he found. In the tall grass, he first saw a skull and some bones that looked like they belonged to a cow. However, under some scattered branches, he discovered the real source of the odor, a nearly fully decomposed human body. Clifton immediately contacted the police. The remains were recovered and sent to a lab for analysis. The body was found unclothed, and while it was confirmed to be a woman, investigators could determine little else initially. Given the circumstances, many suspected that this was Andreen McDonald, and DNA testing later confirmed those suspicions. The medical examiner was unable to determine a clear cause of death due to the advanced decomposition of the body. However, pathologists found injuries including trauma to the jawbone and a fracture at the base of the skull, which matched the type of harm that could be caused by the hammer found in Andre's car. Additionally, much of her hair was missing, which was initially alarming. When the examiners observed partial burns on her right hand, they deduced that someone had tried to burn the body, probably to destroy evidence. As a result of these findings, Andre was officially charged with the crime and taken back into custody. The area where the remains were discovered had been searched several times by law enforcement and volunteers, but the exact location was on private property, behind a fence about 60 feet from the road, making it inaccessible without a warrant. This is why it had not been investigated earlier. When Andre learned that Andreen's remains were found and that evidence indicated she had suffered blunt force trauma, he changed his approach. He informed investigators that he was willing to share everything in exchange for a lighter sentence. After talking with his attorney, Andre presented a revised version of events, painting himself as a victim. He mentioned his wife's infidelity, her attempts to take over their business with her new partner, and his fear that she would take their daughter from him during a divorce. Andre reported that Andreen had recently mentioned ending their marriage again and had allegedly threatened to leave him without anything and take their daughter with her. That evening, they had a heated argument. Andre claimed that Andreen grew aggressive and started hitting him, which led him to defend himself. During the struggle, he said she got a minor cut. Andre admitted to pushing her, causing her to fall, and he then kicked her several times and stepped on her chest to keep her from getting back up. When he heard footsteps in the hallway and his daughter calling for her mom, he panicked. He quickly left the room before the girl could come inside, picked her up, took her back to her room, and told her that her mom would come to check on her later. Andre maintained that when he left the room, Andreen was still alive, lying on the floor with only a slight injury. However, when he returned, she was in the same position but unresponsive. He believed that he might have unintentionally contributed to a fatal outcome by applying too much pressure on her chest during the struggle. Realizing the seriousness of what had happened, Andre began to panic. He took off Andreen's clothes and burned them in his backyard. He then moved her body outside the city, leaving it on private property behind a fence near the remains of a cow. Later, he went home and sent many texts to Andreen's phone, begging her to return, hoping to make it look like she had simply left after a disagreement. Following that, he woke his daughter and took her to his mother's house, asking her to care for her granddaughter while he searched for his missing wife. To further support his story, he visited several hospitals, pretending to look for Andreen. He nearly fainted upon hearing that a woman with the same last name had been admitted to one of the hospitals. By the time the police brought him in for questioning the next morning, they still lacked strong evidence against him, so he was released. After being freed, Andre began to seriously consider ways to ensure the body would never be discovered. He even thought about dismembering and burning it, then scattering the remains in different locations. To do this, he purchased a hatchet, a shovel, fire starter fluid, and heavy-duty plastic bags. The following day, he returned to the location where he had left Andreen. However, when it was time to execute his plan, he could not go through with it. Instead, he poured flammable liquid on her body and attempted to light a fire, but it quickly went out, only burning her hair and partially charring one of her hands. Andre later described the failure as leaving him in a state of utter despair. In a moment of anger, He grabbed an old hammer from his car and struck the body several times before regaining his composure and stopping. He then covered the remains with branches and cow bones. When asked why he visited a gun store, purchased a pistol and ammunition, and then left the items at the counter, Andre stated he couldn't explain his actions. He mentioned that his thoughts were muddled, he hadn't slept for almost 2 days, and he wasn't thinking clearly. The trial faced significant delays, with hearings only commencing in January 2023. The defense team aimed to present Andre as a victim of his circumstances. His lawyers argued that Andreen and her boyfriend were allegedly conspiring to eliminate Andre from their lives to avoid splitting their assets during the divorce. Andre McDonald provided a detailed account of what happened to his wife, but the condition of her body made it impossible to verify his claims. Forensic experts could not determine her exact cause of death or whether her injuries occurred while she was alive or if, as Andre alleged, he hit her with a hammer after she died. What was evident, however, is that for 5 months, Andre stayed silent, trying to conceal the crime and evade responsibility. In February 2023, many were shocked when Andre was acquitted of first-degree murder charges. Instead, the jury convicted him of manslaughter and evidence tampering, resulting in a 25-year prison sentence with the possibility of parole after 15 years. His daughter was awarded to her maternal grandmother. The tragic saga of Andreen McDonald reveals the fragility of trust and the devastating consequences when hidden tensions erupt within a seemingly idyllic life. What began as a shared dream of building a family and a multi-million-dollar empire ended in betrayal, violence, and loss. Andre McDonald's conviction for manslaughter and evidence tampering in February 2023, carrying a 25-year sentence, brought partial justice but left lingering questions about the truth behind Andreen's death. As their daughter finds solace with her maternal grandmother, the McDonald case stands as a stark reminder that even the most prosperous facades can conceal deadly secrets, urging us to confront conflicts before they spiral into tragedy. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Michelle O'Keefe. Michelle O'Keefe grew up in Hanford, California. Her parents, Michael and Patricia, were very proud of their 2 children. Michelle did well in school and pursued her dream of becoming an actress after graduating from high school. However, her bright future took a tragic turn in February 2000. On February 22, Michelle and her friend Jennifer traveled to Los Angeles to be extras in a music video. They arrived in separate cars and parked near a park. Michelle left her newly purchased blue Mustang and drove with Jennifer to Los Angeles. At 9:30 p.m., both girls returned to the park to pick up their cars and leave. Jennifer watched Michelle start the engine, turn on the headlights, and noticed that the taillights were on, indicating that Michelle was preparing to back up. As Jennifer drove down the street, she was surprised to see that the Mustang was not moving right behind her. Thinking that Michelle would soon catch up, Jennifer left the park and headed home. After that night, she would never see her friend again. That evening, a new security guard named Raymond Jennings, 25, began his shift at the park at 8:00 p.m. About an hour and a half into his shift, Raymond became alarmed and contacted his boss on the radio. He had heard an explosion coming from the west side of the parking lot, along with a car alarm. Raymond asked to call the police. Before the police arrived, they found a Ford Mustang parked in the center lane. The keys were still in the ignition, the engine and headlights were still on, and the manual transmission was in neutral. Inside the car, Michelle was sitting in the driver's seat. The deputy sheriff was the first to arrive on the scene. He determined that Michelle had died from her injuries. He also spoke with Raymond. When asked if he saw anyone leave the parking lot immediately after the explosion, Raymond replied that he did not see anyone get out after hearing the alarm and the explosion. Raymond then pointed to the shell casings, indicating that the bullets were found from the location of the Mustang. The driver's door was open, and the window was partially rolled down. A pair of black jeans was on the passenger seat. One of Michelle's shoes was on her right foot, while the other was on the ground. Police also found a gold earring on the ground. The Los Angeles County Sheriff's Office found that 5 shots were fired from the same 9mm gun. Police investigated, and there was no evidence that Michelle had any enemies. Her closest friends said she had no problems with her boyfriend and could not identify anyone who wanted to harm her. Police considered the possibility that Michelle was the victim of a robbery or attempted carjacking, especially since her cell phone was missing. The last call she made was to her friend Jennifer, just minutes before she got into the car. It is likely that the killer took her cell phone, but her wallet and $100 were still in the car, found between the center console and the driver's seat, Jennifer said. Michelle felt uncomfortable going to college that night in the outfit she wore in the music video because it was a little revealing. She planned to change her clothes before returning to campus. Raymond told police 3 times that he did not see anyone else in the parking lot at the time of the crime, making him the prime suspect. Raymond is a father of 5 and has served in the California National Guard. He was working toward becoming a U.S. Marshal. As a key witness in the murder investigation, Raymond was eager to assist. Police invited him to the station for interviews several times, which he gladly accepted. During the interviews, his statements seemed inconsistent and lacked credibility compared to what had already been established. Raymond said that when he arrived at the crime scene, Michelle was still alive. He claimed that her hands were moving or twitching, which made him think she was not dead. However, the medical examiner's findings contradicted Raymond's testimony. Michelle died instantly from her injuries. Police identified Raymond as the prime suspect, largely based on the belief that he was the only person present in the parking lot during the crime. 2 weeks after the murder, a woman named Victoria told police that she and 4 people in her car had witnessed the murder. At the time of the murder, Victoria was in the parking lot listening to loud music. She and her friends heard an explosion. Just before the explosion, Victoria noticed a security guard walking past her parked car toward Michelle. After hearing the explosion and the car alarm, she and her friends left the parking lot and found Michelle dead in the car. As they left, Victoria spoke to the security guard and asked him what had happened. He said that have heard gunshots, prompting the entire group to leave the parking lot. Police believe Raymond was the person seen near the Mustang at the time of the murder. Raymond later cooperated with the investigation, participating in an interview and agreeing to take a lie detector test, which he ultimately failed. At this point in the investigation, police believed they had identified the killer, but they lacked concrete evidence. The murder weapon had disappeared from the scene, and there was no physical evidence linking Raymond to the crime. Although Raymond legally owned a semi-automatic pistol, it was not the weapon used in the murder, stalling the investigation for years. During this time, Michelle's family hired a private investigator determined to find justice for Michelle. While the case was still under investigation, Raymond was deployed to Iraq. Upon his return 5 years later, he was arrested for Michelle's murder. Unable to post his $1 million bail, he remained in custody for nearly a year while the prosecution and defense prepared for trial. A devoted father of 5 and twice married, most of Raymond's family lived in North Carolina, but he had moved to California for better job opportunities. He considered himself a devout man and had helped a friend distribute Christian music CDs. Despite these qualities and his lack of criminal record, he was now charged with murder. During the trial, the defense pointed to the lack of forensic evidence linking Raymond to the crime. Raymond's DNA was not found in the car or on Michelle, and DNA found under her fingernails did not match his. There were no fingerprints, gun residue, or blood evidence linking Raymond. His car was searched for weapons. None were found. He resigned from his position as a park ranger shortly after the incident. While on patrol, he was approached by 2 men who threatened him and asked if he was the guard on duty the night of the murder, which made him feel unsafe and prompted him to resign. He returned his uniform, which was later turned over to the police by the security guard. However, the lab report found that the uniform was simply dirty and that Raymond had not even attempted to wash it before returning it. Importantly, The uniform showed no blood, gunpowder, or other physical evidence implicating Raymond in the shooting. Victoria testified that she had seen a security guard next to the Mustang in the parking lot. The prosecution exaggerated this testimony, claiming that Raymond had been at the scene of the murder just minutes before the shooting. After a week of deliberations, the jury was unable to reach a unanimous decision and announced that the trial would be retried. In February 2009, a second trial took place in California, but the jury again failed to reach a unanimous decision. This time, however, 11 jurors voted to convict, while only one juror dissented. Michelle's murder had been widely reported in the media for many years. Victoria was deemed ineligible to attend because she was serving time for other crimes, so her testimony was read in court. In December 2009, a third jury found Raymond Jennings guilty of second-degree murder. At the sentencing hearing, Michelle's family pleaded with the judge to impose the maximum sentence on the killer. Michelle's younger brother, who had confronted Raymond at his home after many years, urged him to take responsibility for his actions. Raymond responded by declaring his innocence. Raymond found peace in his life because he felt no guilt. He did not kill Michelle. Raymond was sentenced to 40 years in prison. Nearly 10 years into his sentence, Raymond still maintained his innocence, but his appeals had run out. He sought help from the state's Innocence Project, but progress was slow, and without new key evidence, it seemed unlikely that Raymond would be released for years. Raymond's situation improved when civil defense attorney Jeff Ehrlich took on Raymond's case in 2011. After reviewing all the evidence from 3 trials and police records, Jeff concluded that Raymond had been wrongly convicted. They acknowledged that the original investigation was flawed and decided to gather new evidence by consulting with their own experts. They submitted their findings to the newly formed Sentencing Review Unit. A key piece of evidence was the report that the lack of gunpowder residue on Raymond's jacket cuffs suggested he was not the killer. Ballistics evidence shows the 9mm weapon used to kill Michelle is similar to the weapon used by Bloods gang members in recent shootings. Victoria's social media posts suggest she was involved with the Bloods. In the years following Michelle's murder, Victoria had a history of violent crimes. She was arrested several times for assault with a weapon, one of which resulted in her boyfriend, Andrew, being convicted. At the time of Michelle's murder, Andrew was also a member of the Bloods. 4 months after the murder, he was involved in robberies, including the theft of a Ford Mustang. He used the same weapon used to kill Michelle. When Andrew was arrested in June 2000, he was wearing an earring that matched the description of an earring that belonged to Michelle that was missing from the crime scene. However, Andrew was never questioned about Michelle's murder, and the identities of the people in the SUV with Victoria were never determined. On January 23, 2017, a Los Angeles County Superior Court judge overturned Raymond's conviction, finding him innocent. He served 11 years. In March 2017, the state of California awarded him more than $538,000 in damages. Michelle's family was disappointed that the jury's verdict against Raymond could be easily overturned by a newly formed unit. However, the appeals court upheld the judge's decision. The family continues to struggle after losing Michelle. A few years later, they lost their son to a drug overdose. The couple is now divorced. They have suffered the loss of 2 children and also lost their only source of comfort, knowing that Michelle's killers are in prison. The investigation into her case continues. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today, we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Diana Garnica. On Saturday, May 6, 2017, a 17-year-old girl named Diana Garnica went out to meet her 40-year-old neighbor, Dario Suarez. As the day drew to a close, Diana did not return home. Her mother became concerned and tried to contact her, but was unable to reach her. After speaking with Dario, who gave no information about their encounter and claimed that he had not seen Diana that day. Her mother became increasingly suspicious. Diana Garnica was born on March 30, 2000, in Argentina. Those who knew her, including friends and family, noted that she displayed maturity beyond her years. Diana was very responsible and enjoyed helping her family. A diligent student, she did well in school, but eventually had to drop out of school to help her family during the financial crisis. She made the difficult choice to drop out of school to find a job and help her parents. In addition, Diana has a boyfriend her own age. People also comment on her ability to protect herself. She knows how to keep her distance from rude or dangerous people. Diana is very friendly and is the second child in a family of 8 siblings. Later, her parents divorced, which was especially difficult for her, as she had deep feelings for her father. However, she maintained a close relationship with her mother. After the divorce, Diana's mother moved with all the children to a town in Alderates, Tucumán province. After settling into their new home, they got to know their closest neighbors, Dario Suarez and his family. Susana, Diana's mother, and her siblings formed a strong friendship with Dario's family, and they became so close that they treated each other like family. Susana often babysat Dario's children while they were away. Dario respected and loved Diana's family and treated her with great care, like his own sister. There was never any indication that Dario had inappropriate behavior towards Diana or her family, reflecting the deep trust and understanding between the two families. Diana went to work every morning and came home in the evening. Occasionally, she met members of her church community and spent time with her boyfriend and close friends. Unlike many girls her age, Diana did not like to dance and avoided discos and nightclubs. Those who knew her realized that she preferred to spend her free time at home. On May 6, 2017, Diana finished her work as usual and waited for her sister at the designated place so they could go home together, just like they did every day. When Diana got home, her neighbor Dario called her and asked if they could meet to buy an air conditioner as a surprise for his mother. He asked her to keep it a secret. However, after hanging up, Diana went to her mother's room and excitedly recounted the whole conversation, ignoring Dario's request to keep it a secret. She found it funny because it was still a long way from summer. In May, where she lived, the weather was quite cool and sometimes even cold. At that time, Diana did not suspect anything unusual and just told her mother that she would help Dario choose a gift. Diana had a very close relationship with her family and shared everything with them. On that unfortunate day, Dario sent Diana several text messages. He reminded her about the gift for her mother and emphasized that no one in her family should know about it, not her mother, father, siblings, or anyone else. Dario also asked Diana to keep their motorbike trip a secret. However, Diana read all of his messages but chose not to keep it a secret. She told her mother Susana everything. As a result, her mother was fully informed about the scheduled meeting between Diana and Dario. Diana left the house to wait for Dario at the bus stop. Hours passed, and finally, Dario returned home. Susana heard the sound of his motorbike and went out to check. Seeing Dario alone, she assumed that Diana had chosen to walk home alone. She thought that Dario's wife might be jealous. Therefore, Susana decided to wait a little longer, hoping that her daughter would come home soon. Time passed, and the girl still did not return. Worried, Susana went to see Dario to ask about Diana's whereabouts. Dario quickly claimed that he did not know where she was, saying that he had not seen her that day. This answer made Susana feel strange and suspicious because she knew that her daughter was supposed to meet Dario. Although he denied it, Dario offered to help by suggesting that he could use his motorbike to find Diana, assuming that she had just gone out for a walk. Diana's relatives called her several times, but soon realized that it was useless. She had left her phone at home while it was charging and could not answer any calls or messages. They decided to check her text message history and found every text message that Dario had sent to Diana that day. It was learned that Dario had asked Diana to help him buy a gift for his mother, which suggested that they had indeed met. One of Diana's brothers then decided to confront Dario about these messages, hoping to get him to admit that Diana was with him. When Dario noticed one of Diana's brothers approaching his house, he fled. Diana's father, who was divorced from her mother and lived on his own, learned of her disappearance and quickly arrived at the scene. The entire family then went to the police for assistance. At the police station, Diana's relatives explained in detail what had happened and showed several text messages that implicated Dario in their daughter's disappearance. For the family, Dario was the only suspect. However, the police dismissed their concerns and did not take their complaint seriously. Instead, they suggested that the family look for common gathering places for young people. Diana's parents were disappointed with the police response and insisted that if their daughter went anywhere, it was only between home and work, occasionally going to church. They believed that there were only a few places where she could have gone. In addition, the family was certain that on that day, she had met her neighbor Dario, but he had returned without her and had begun to avoid them. Despite this information, the police informed Diana's relatives that they could not file a missing person report because they did not have enough personnel and resources to search for her. They advised the family to go to another police station with patrols to begin the search immediately. However, as the family left the station feeling hopeless, they were surprised to see a patrol car parked at the entrance with 7 police officers nearby, relaxing and chatting. The problem was that they had the resources to conduct a search for the missing Diana, but they chose not to. Considering the situation, Diana's family decided to continue looking for Dario, who had tried to run away. They went to the brick factory where Dario was supposed to work. When Diana's father got out of the car, he noticed that Dario's entire family had gathered near the factory building for some unknown reason. This was unusual, especially since it was 2 a.m. on a Sunday morning. Inside the factory, the lights were still on and the kilns were still running, even though they had not been used for months. Diana's father asked Dario's family where he was. They replied that he had gone to the toilet. However, Diana's relatives soon discovered that Dario had actually gone deep into the mountains and had no intention of returning. Diana's family tried to talk to his wife and mother. Unfortunately, no one could provide any information about Dario's situation. Diana's family was suspicious and asked questions. Why was Dario's entire family at the factory that night if none of them knew what had happened? Why was the factory, which had been shut down for a long time, suddenly operating early on a Sunday morning? Frustrated, Diana's family approached the judiciary and tried to file a complaint with the prosecutor's office. They expressed their concerns by going to the police the day before, and the police assured them that information about Diana's disappearance would be passed on to the prosecutor's office. However, when they arrived, no one at the office knew about the situation, possibly because no official statement had been filed. As a result, the family had to start the complaint process all over again. After filing a new complaint, Prosecutor Claudio Bonari went to the scene of the incident. Claudio instinctively sensed that something was amiss, so he quickly began organizing searches. He started at the home of the suspect, Dario Suarez, and then moved to the brick factory where Dario worked. The prosecutor discovered that the factory's kiln had been operating the night before, which raised some disturbing thoughts. Claudio later reported that he faced unexpected challenges during the investigation that day. The judges from the investigative court and his office secretary were not present, which prevented them from issuing a search warrant in time. Prosecutor Claudio therefore decided to conduct searches without the necessary warrant. He began his investigation by searching Dario's home and the factory. The prosecutor's main theory was that Dario might have kidnapped Diana and assaulted her. According to this theory, the factory could be the crime scene where Dario dumped the body. However, the prosecutor also considered the possibility that Dario did not act alone. He suspected that other people, including Dario's wife, mother, factory owner, and employees who were present that night, might have been involved in the crime. A second investigation was launched. The theory was that Diana might have been kidnapped and possibly handed over to the mafia or human traffickers. This theory did not come about by accident. In fact, in Diana's family, it was discovered that Dario was involved with very dangerous people who kidnapped young girls to then sell them or transfer them to bars and nightclubs. A girl on Facebook claimed that a man named Christian had handed Diana over to a human trafficking group. She detailed on her personal page how Diana was put in a nice car and mentioned an envelope of money that was supposed to be for Christian. However, this so-called witness later confessed that she had lied to blame her ex-boyfriend for everything after he left her. This situation required the prosecutors and their team to thoroughly review the documents they had for the investigation. As a result, significant resources were wasted on this false lead, hindering the actual investigation. Meanwhile, Prosecutor Claudio chose to pursue the case under the hypothesis of illegal detention and possible murder. His main theory was supported by the efforts of sniffer dogs who searched the area, as well as firefighters from Punta Arena, who assisted in the police-led searches and raids. The dogs repeatedly followed Diana's scent, leading them in the same direction. This gave them a clear path that she would have taken that day. The path started from Diana's house, then to Dario's house, and continued from there to the brick factory. The police therefore focused their search on both Dario's house and the factory. At the factory, the dogs discovered a pendant with the letter D and a belt with traces of blood. During a search of the homes of Dario and his relatives, police confiscated their cell phones and examined their text message histories. A manuscript discovered at Dario's home confirmed that his relatives were involved in covering up the crime. Regarding the brick factory, the prosecutor conducted 3 searches there, believing that the final crucial evidence would be discovered to clarify what happened on May 6. Claudio was convinced that all the answers would be found at the site. Therefore, on May 13, the police, together with forensic experts, returned to the factory for the 3rd time in a week to re-examine the furnace that had attracted the dogs' attention. In the furnace, they found the remains of teeth and a piece of surgical steel. A month later, on June 18, Prosecutor Claudio informed the parties concerned of some disturbing news. The evidence found at the brick factory had mysteriously disappeared. As a result, the prosecutor declared the case secret, which meant that neither the parties concerned nor the media would receive any further updates. An internal investigation was launched involving 10 police officers. 7 were released while 3 faced charges. The case has been investigated in secret since then. There was speculation that the envelopes containing the evidence may have been damaged, leading to the loss of evidence. However, Prosecutor Claudio and Diana's family were not convinced by this explanation. They believed that those involved in their daughter's disappearance were powerful and dangerous people who could manipulate the situation to hide any information. Dario later turned himself in to the police. What was most surprising was that Dario arrived with a highly paid and clearly financially beyond his means private attorney. This was no ordinary attorney. He was a top specialist, often hired by the wealthy and influential. He was not a public defender, but someone with a proven track record of successfully defending clients involved in questionable activities. Dario arrived with this attorney, much to Diana's family's surprise. Everyone knew that Dario could not afford such legal representation. In fact, Diana's parents had struggled to raise enough money to hire an attorney to help investigate their daughter's case. Dario's ability to hire such an expensive attorney raised suspicions about his involvement in a serious situation and showed that he had connections with powerful people. Dario's lawyer ordered him to exercise his right to silence and confirm only what had already been proven by the accusing party. In particular, the text messages that he exchanged with Diana on the day of her disappearance. The lawyer also instructed that the initial evidence gathered by Prosecutor Claudio be dismissed, as the searches had been conducted without proper authorization. Of the 12 people initially suspected and detained in connection with the case, all were eventually released, leaving only Dario in custody. As there was no further evidence linking him to the crime beyond what had already been gathered, the police were unable to make any progress in solving the case or bring further charges. As a result, the investigation stalled and Dario was eventually released on bail. In January 2018, after a series of disturbing events, Diana's sister was attacked by a woman. Diana's sister reported the incident to the police, who refused to accept her complaint. Like the initial complaint against Diana, this one failed to attract the attention of the police. Soon after, more puzzling events took place. Diana's family received small sums of cash from unidentified people on 3 separate occasions, accompanied by notes that appeared to have been written by Diana. These messages gave the family hope that she was still alive. One note read, "Mom, I'm Diana. I'm alive. They're holding me. Please come get me." Another message conveyed a similar plea. 3 banknotes were sent to a lab for analysis. 2 of them tested negative, showing that the handwriting did not match the notes in Diana's notebook. The 3rd banknote initially tested positive, showing that it matched Diana's handwriting. However, when retested, the results were negative, indicating that the handwriting was not hers. This case is indeed full of inexplicable details. First, the evidence found disappeared. Then these notes appeared. The identity of the handwriting remains unknown. The discovery of these notes has rekindled the family's hope for their daughter's return and led them to form new theories about her possible location. Diana's parents still believe she is alive, while they feel the police are unwilling to pursue her case. In May 2019, 2 years after Dario Suarez was arrested for a crime he was suspected of but had no evidence to prove, Dario was released under the Argentine Penal Code. 2 years and 4 months after Diana went missing, the federal court decided to close her case due to insufficient evidence. Currently, the main theory of the prosecution is that Diana was kidnapped and is likely the victim of violence and murder. Throughout the investigation and searches were carried out at various locations, and many witnesses were interviewed, but no one provided clear information about what happened. Hello, crime enthusiasts! Are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Benno Neumayer. In today's story, we focus on the Neumayer family, who live in Balna, a city in northern Italy. The family consists of parents Peter Neumayer and Laura Perselli. Their son Benno is 30 years old, and their daughter Maid is 27 years old. Benno is a doctor who has completed his university education and is dedicated to fitness. His father, Peter, is 63 years old, and his mother, Laura, is 68 years old, both retired from teaching at school. Despite their age, they are still active in social and cultural activities. The family is respected in the community. On January 4, 2021, Laura and Peter suddenly disappeared. They were last seen that morning when they went to the supermarket. Laura was planning to visit her mother, who had just returned home from the hospital. Laura rode her bike to her mother's house. A few hours later, Laura's sister sent her a short video of their sick mother, but Laura never opened the message. At the same time, Laura's daughter Maid was on vacation with a friend outside the city and sent her mother a photo but received no response. Benno called his mother at 8:30 that evening, but she did not answer. 3 minutes later, he sent a voice message to his girlfriend, Martina, expressing his concern that he had not been able to reach his parents. He told her that he would be at her house in about an hour or two for dinner as planned, and that he would be late. Benno asked her to call him back later on a regular phone line instead of WhatsApp because he did not have an internet connection. Martina called him back shortly afterwards, and they arranged to meet at 10:12 p.m. When Benno arrived at her house in his father's car, he said he had forgotten to shower. He went to wash his face and asked Martina if she could do his laundry. She didn't ask any questions and agreed to help. Benno gave Martina a bag full of dirty clothes. She didn't check the contents and threw them in the washing machine. The couple then had a great evening at the bar and a passionate night at her house. Benno didn't leave his girlfriend's house until 5:30 a.m. When he was with her at around 11 p.m., he sent his mother a short text message wishing her a good night. He noticed that she hadn't read it, but he was too busy that evening to think about it. Early in the morning of January 5, Laura's sister came to her house. She knocked on the door and rang the bell, but there was no response. It was clear that no one was home. Laura's sister was worried and called Benno to ask about Laura and Peter. However, Benno said he was not home and did not know where they were. Laura's sister was busy taking care of her sick mother and could not leave her alone, so she asked Benno to try to find them. Benno promised to help and suggested that their parents might have gone to the mountains, as they often did. He advised them to wait a few days. Meanwhile, Laura's daughter, Maid, was at the resort with her friend and boyfriend. She noticed that her messages had been ignored, which made her suspicious. She called her dad and was surprised when he didn't answer. His social media pages also showed unread messages, and she couldn't reach her parents, which made her even more worried. So Maid called her brother Benno, who said he was walking his dog in the mountains a few kilometers away from their parents' house, and he couldn't check on them. He seemed worried throughout the call, and his story sounded strange. The dog was very old and sick, barely moving even in their yard, so it was hard to believe he could hike several kilometers into the mountains with the dog. Unable to get more information from Benno, Maid decided to ask a neighbor who lived next door to her parents for help around 1:30 p.m. The neighbor was home, so she agreed to check on her parents. The neighbor knocked on the door, and Benno opened it. At that time, the neighbor was still on the phone with Maid. She immediately recognized her brother's voice and was surprised that he had just refused her request to check on her parents. Benno explained that he had rushed back to his parents' house after walking the dog and was now home. Benno said that their parents were not home and insisted that he did not know where they had gone. Maid called all the hospitals in the city because she had a strong feeling that something was wrong with her parents. Eventually, Maid stopped her outing and returned home. She asked Benno if he knew what had happened to their parents, but he said he did not know. He explained that he had spent the previous day with his girlfriend and had only returned home in the morning when their parents were no longer there. Feeling desperate, Maid decided to contact the police to report her parents missing. At this point, Benno began to discourage her from calling the police. He seemed to be stalling for time, but he suggested another approach that he thought would be more effective. So he contacted a friend who was a police officer for advice on how to handle the situation. Benno's friend suggested contacting a search and rescue service that specialized in mountain rescue, but that didn't help either. In the end, Maid decided to go to the police himself, regardless of whether Benno supported her decision or not. He eventually agreed, and they went to the police station together. The young man told them about his parents' disappearance and suggested that they might have gone into the mountains. He mentioned that an avalanche had occurred in the area they frequented, about a day after they left. He believed that his mother and father might have been buried under the snow, This explanation seemed plausible to the police and became the main focus of the investigation. Laura and Peter were declared missing, and search teams were deployed to the site of the avalanche. Trained dogs were used to search. Despite a thorough search, it took a long time to cover the entire area. The police decided to interview Benno to gather more information. They noticed that he was evasive and increasingly uncomfortable when asked difficult questions, making his behavior seem suspicious. After leaving the office, Benno suddenly displayed a sudden and inexplicable aggression. He attributed this outburst to hunger, fatigue, and stress. The next day, there was still no news from the police about Peter and Laura, prompting Maid to return to the station. Benno tried to stop her again, insisting that the police needed more time to conduct the search. During this time, another girl named Jasmine contacted Benno. It turned out he was chatting with 3 other people on Tinder, and he was particularly interested in Jasmine, and he showed little interest in the ongoing investigation. On January 6, Maid returned to the police station. It had been 2 days since her parents had gone missing. Laura and Peter had not contacted her, which made her believe that something had happened to her parents. They usually informed her before they went into the mountains and would prepare carefully for such trips. She felt the need to conduct a more thorough search of the area near their home. The police were actively involved from the beginning. Initially, they focused on the possibility that the couple had gone missing in the mountains. During this time, Benno went to the supermarket with his new girlfriend, Jasmine, where he bought a large amount of hydrogen peroxide, explaining that he needed it to prepare to sell his father's car. Search teams along with volunteers were organized to search the areas outside the mountains and around Laura. Despite the large resources and the participation of about 600 people in the search effort, Peter and Laura were still missing. Everyone worked together in the hope of finding them quickly. Finally, Maid expressed her concerns. She thought about Benno's strange behavior and the fact that their parents had disappeared shortly after she left the city for a short time. During that time, Benno was supposed to be with them, and their relationship was complicated. She suspected that he might know more than he was letting on. The police decided to question Benno again. This time, during questioning, he was overly friendly, which was surprising given his violent reaction after his previous encounter with the police. The officers suspected that he was deliberately controlling his demeanor to avoid revealing any important information. During this time, suspicions grew that Peter and Laura were likely dead, and it was believed that the couple's son, Benno, might be involved. Benno became the prime suspect. Maid regularly contacted the police, sharing information about Benno and their parents. Benno's behavior was often so rude and aggressive that Laura was afraid to be home alone with him. On January 7, the police tracked Benno down. That day, Jasmine and Benno got into the family car and went to a hardware store where they bought rags, cleaning supplies, a bucket, and hydrogen peroxide. While Benno asked Jasmine to pay for the items, they stopped at a car wash before heading home. The police arrested them there and found all the items they had purchased in the trunk of the car. The car was impounded for further investigation. The police also attempted to confiscate Benno's jacket, but he refused to hand it over. Benno was questioned again that day. Ultimately, he did not provide any useful information, and since there was no evidence against him, he was released. Although the police confiscated the cleaning kit, Benno and Jasmine decided to clean the house. Benno asked her to wear the jacket the police had asked to confiscate. She did not suspect anything and agreed. After a short while, he took the jacket off Jasmine and put it away. Later that day, the police arrested Jasmine, thinking she might be involved in the case. They questioned her for hours about Peter and Laura's disappearance, but could not find any evidence to link her to the crime. Jasmine is later confronted by the Carabinieri police several times during interrogation, including when Benno's jacket is confiscated. Her hair and skin particles are found on the jacket, forcing her to prove her innocence. She explains that she helped Benno clean the house and wore the jacket, but she was unaware of the implications and risk of harm to herself. On January 17, Maid returns to her parents' house and finds Benno there. She decides to voice her suspicions, which leads to an altercation between them. Maid suggests that Benno may be involved in Peter and Laura's disappearance. He becomes hysterical, shaking as he tries to convince her that she is mistaken. He eventually swears that he had nothing to do with it. Despite his assurances, she remains suspicious of Benno, knowing he is a good liar. Benno tries to justify his actions. However, Maid knew about his troubled relationship with their parents and his aggressive nature. He was the only one capable of causing harm to their loved ones. On January 18, Benno was the prime suspect in the case. The police suspected that he had killed his parents and then hidden their bodies. But the police lacked solid evidence. They only found a small blood stain on the car, not enough to confirm the death of his parents. However, the investigation continued. Important information came to light when Benno's phone was confiscated and examined. Geolocation data from the phone was examined on the evening when Peter and Laura went missing. The data showed that Benno had left the city and stopped near the bridge on the Adige River, where he stayed for a considerable amount of time. The police believed that he may have dumped their bodies there. This location became the focus of the search for evidence. On February 6, 2021, a search operation was launched in the Adige River. Police quickly located Laura's body. However, her husband, Peter, had been missing for more than 3 months. He was finally found on April 27, after Laura's body was discovered on the riverbank. A brown stain that looked like blood was found on the bridge over the river. Forensic experts analyzed the sample and confirmed that it was Peter's blood. Surveillance camera footage captured Benno's car on the evening of the incident as he returned from the bridge to his ex-girlfriend Martina's house, confirming that he was at the scene where the bodies were found. Peter's body was found by forensic experts in relatively good condition. A layer of algae had formed on it, slowing down decomposition, and the cold temperature helped preserve the tissues. This made it easy to spot signs of strangulation on both Peter and his wife. Marks on their necks indicated that they had been attacked from behind. The cause of death was confirmed to be strangulation, and it was determined that they had been thrown into the river after they were dead, as there was no water in their lungs. Given Benno's strong and muscular physique, he was able to overpower his elderly parents without much difficulty. After his parents' bodies were found, Benno admitted that he was involved in their deaths. On the night of the incident, he had an argument with Peter. Benno tried to avoid the argument by locking himself in his room, but his father barged in and continued the argument. In a fit of rage, Benno attacked his father with a rope and strangled him. When Laura heard the noise and went upstairs, he feared that she would call the police, so he strangled her as well. Although his confession seemed credible, his motives seemed too weak to justify such a brutal act. Benno explained that his relationship with his parents had become increasingly strained in the months leading up to the incident, marked by frequent arguments after he moved back in with them. Benno had begun paying rent at his father's request. However, due to the constant arguments, his father decided that it would be best if Benno moved out. He began to encourage his son to rent his own apartment, but Benno refused. To pressure him to move, his father increased the rent to €700, which Benno considered excessive and unfair. That evening, Peter called him a loser for spending too much time on the computer and forced him to walk the dog. Another argument broke out. This conflict escalated into a tragic situation. Benno claims that his father was the first to confront him, trying to kick him out of the house. As a result, Benno felt he had no choice but to defend himself. The investigation revealed that immediately after the murder, Benno began to create an alibi. He called his mother's cell phone, pretending to go looking for her. After the murder, he asked Martina to wash his clothes to erase any evidence. Although she handed the washed clothes over to the police, no incriminating marks were found on them. Police believe that his efforts to conceal the evidence indicate a deliberate act. Not only did Benno understand what he was doing, but he also tried to avoid consequences for this brutal crime. Benno attempted to explain his actions by claiming that he was mentally disturbed and affected by the attack. However, his calm demeanor and careful efforts to conceal evidence of the crime showed that he was fully aware of his actions. After his arrest, psychiatrists evaluated him and determined that he had a personality disorder characterized by narcissism and social problems. He had recently had frequent sudden outbursts of anger, which doctors attributed to his steroid use. Benno began taking additional medication. This led to a significant deterioration in his mental state due to hormonal changes, leading to increased aggression and a complete loss of self-control. Maid said that he would often attack her when angry and was often violent with other family members. On one occasion, she suffered multiple bruises as a result of his aggression. Even as a child, Benno tried to strangle her, but their parents were present at the time. In 2020, Benno entered a relationship with a girl named Nadine, and they moved to Germany together. A friend noted that at first, Benno was very attentive and caring. However, over time, his behavior became controlling, showing signs of selfishness and abusive tendencies. He tried to create distance between Nadine and her family, isolating her from her parents and friends, leaving her to spend most of her time alone. Things got worse when in June 2020, Nadine discovered that Benno had used her credit card without permission and stolen money from her account. This betrayal prompted Nadine to end the relationship. She called Benno's parents and insisted that they pick up their son from her apartment. His parents had to drive to pick him up. Just a day after their return, Benno made amends with Nadine, promising to pay her back and asking her parents to let him go home to Nadine. While Nadine was at work, he sent her a selfie showing him covered in blood. Benno claimed he had gotten into a fight with a friend named Dean. However, Dean was in another part of town at the time and did not see Benno. Benno sent some of the photos to his mother, Laura, who was concerned. She contacted a friend for advice. The friend suggested that Benno could be dangerous and advised Laura not to go to his apartment alone. Laura suspected that Benno's mental health had deteriorated due to his use of anabolic steroids. Benno was eventually taken away, and it was discovered that he had been self-harming due to hallucinations. After this incident, Nadine decided not to see him again, but he was discharged after only 3 days. During his stay, doctors did not have enough time to carry out all the necessary tests to diagnose his condition. It was suspected that Benno was schizophrenic, and his family insisted on further testing, but he refused and began taking medication for schizophrenia. By the time Benno's trial began, he had been diagnosed with acute polymorphic psychotic disorder rather than schizophrenia. This misdiagnosis meant that he was taking the wrong medication, which likely worsened his mental condition. While on steroids, he was taking a dangerous cocktail of drugs that affected his behavior. Immediately before the murder, Benno was released from the psychiatric hospital and returned home. During this time, his mother became extremely concerned for his safety. She hid all the knives in the house and locked the doors at night. She believed that as long as she did not provoke him, everything would be fine, so she tried to avoid arguments and limit her interactions with him. Unfortunately, this did not protect her from a tragic end. On November 19, 2022, Benno Neumayer was sentenced to life in prison. However, his lawyer quickly appealed the decision, arguing that Benno was insane due to a combination of negative factors that worsened his mental condition. To support the defense's claims, several independent medical assessments were conducted, which found him mentally stable. The prosecution pointed out that Benno acted deliberately, as he tried to create an alibi and conceal his actions. Just minutes after the murder, he called his girlfriend, pretending to be worried about his parents' absence. He ruthlessly deceived those around him, sending messages to his deceased mother, deceiving his sister and neighbors, all to escape justice. After the retrial, Benno's life sentence was upheld and remains in effect. The murders of Peter and Laura received considerable media attention in Italy and caused widespread public fear. Welcome back to our channel. Today we will explore a new case. The case of Cynthia George. On an afternoon on June 16, 2001, an attack at a gas station in Akron, Ohio, shattered the peaceful atmosphere and claimed the life of a successful businessman once admired by the upper class. Ed George and Cynthia George were famous residents and were considered the wealthiest in the state of Agaya, USA. Ed was a successful Lebanese businessman who owned a banquet hall and a nightclub. He was one of 8 children in a Lebanese Catholic family. After completing his education at the University of Michigan, he joined the family business founded by his father, Edwin George, in 1948. Although the original building was destroyed by fire, Ed rebuilt it and expanded the venue to include an entertainment center for events. During its peak, the establishment hosted renowned musical acts. Cynthia George, Ed's wife, was a charming and attractive socialite, known for her petite frame, blonde hair, and striking blue eyes. They had 7 children together. Cynthia grew up in North Canton in a low-income family. Her father worked as a miner, and her mother took care of the home and children. Lacking exposure to wealth, Cynthia began working at a young age. Although she couldn't afford higher education, she quickly realized that her looks could provide her with a path to a more comfortable life, leading her to pursue a career as a dancer. At this time, Cynthia, a 20-year-old, attended a nightclub casting call in 1978, managed by Ed, who was 15 years her senior. Although she didn't get the job, she caught Ed's attention, and they began dating. He seemed to be a convinced Catholic and was in no hurry to get married. However, after 6 years together, they got married in a lavish ceremony, attended by over 500 guests. This marriage fulfilled Cynthia's dream of a luxurious lifestyle. Cynthia and Ed moved into a spacious mansion with 5 bedrooms and 5 bathrooms. First of all, they wanted children, and over the next few years, Cynthia gave birth to 4 daughters. Ed felt this wasn't enough, so they adopted 2 boys. In 1994, at the age of 40, Cynthia became pregnant again and had another girl. The family comfortably managed their large household with the help of servants and a steady income from an upscale restaurant at the club. Despite his busy work schedule, Ed always made time for his children. He would comb his daughter's hair every morning, assist with their homework in the evenings. Being a person with a healthy lifestyle, he is never absent from any sporting event. Meanwhile, Cynthia relies heavily on nannies to take care of her children and enjoys a leisurely life of partying and shopping. Her husband supported this lifestyle, giving her plenty of freedom. While his substantial wealth, Cynthia often complained about receiving too little money, even though she indulged in whatever she wanted. In fact, Cynthia turned out to be not such a decent woman as she initially seemed. From the first years of marriage, she had lovers that her husband did not suspect. She flirted and met different men right in his club. One of her main lovers was Jeff Zach, a tall and charming man known for his appeal to women. He had Israeli roots. By 1976, he dropped out of school and decided to move to his homeland to study his Jewish origins. He became a citizen of Israel and even served in the army as a paratrooper. Jeff was multilingual and claimed to be a special agent involved in real combat operations. After 3 years, he returned to the United States. At 29, he met a beautiful brunette named Bonnie Cook in an Arizona restaurant. They quickly fell in love, decided to solidify their union by marriage, and then have children. During this time, Bonnie discovered a different side of her husband. She noticed that Jeff seemed to have two contrasting personalities. One was calm and gentle, while the other was aggressive and cruel. These personalities appear unpredictably. 2 years after their wedding, they welcomed a son. During this period, Jeff attempted to start a new business. He had many different startup ideas, but none were successful. They managed to make ends meet and moved into a comfortable 2-story house in the small town of Stowe, Agaya. Here, Jeff began a business involving vending machines. Although he became somewhat calmer over time, he still frequently experienced angry outbursts. His violent nature even led to several legal issues. Shortly after moving in one evening, Bonnie and Jeff were dining at Ed's club when Bonnie noticed her husband staring intently at a beautiful stranger. During dinner, Jeff even complimented the blonde multiple times, which greatly upset Bonnie. This attractive woman was Cynthia. That night, Jeff also met Ed, the owner of the club, and realized that building a friendship with him could significantly benefit his business. He spent the rest of the evening socializing with Ed and his wife, leaving Bonnie alone at the table. Jeff and Ed quickly hit it off and began a friendship. Eventually, Bonnie and Cynthia also grew close, regularly visiting each other's families and celebrating holidays together. Ed invested in Jeff's business by purchasing 100 vending machines and connecting him with valuable partnerships. This investment allowed Jeff to place machines in prime locations throughout the city, leading to the success of his business. Despite the rapid development of the business, soon, Bonnie became the main breadwinner of the family. Her career as a real estate agent was thriving. During this time, Jeff retired a little from business Respawn and spent more time with their son. The boy helped service vending machines, buy products for them, and carry out scheduled repairs. Jeff also started attending his son's training sessions and sporting events. Despite the fact that the life of both families seemed ideal from the outside, problems continued inside. Cynthia, who was 40 years old at the time, struggled with depression. Her friends encouraged her to participate in a local beauty contest in Agaya in 2000, specifically for married women over 21. Although Cynthia met the age requirement, she would be competing against younger women, many nearly half her age. Despite this challenge, she was determined and motivated. Winning the contest could allow her to represent her state at the national level and potentially advance to international competitions. The prizes included gold jewelry and complimentary beauty salon appointments. Cynthia was motivated by a desire to win and prove that she was the most beautiful in the city and the state. Her main goal was to gain influence. To prepare for the beauty contest, she tightened her diet and increased her training. Ultimately, Cynthia placed third in the competition. Despite her disappointment, she held her head high and smiled when the winner was announced. Competing at 40 years old as a mother of 7 against 20-year-olds was a significant achievement in itself. Even though she didn't win first place, her popularity grew. On June 16, 2001, multiple calls came into the police station near a gas station reporting an attack on the driver of an Ford SUV vehicle. 2 witnesses heard an explosion and saw a man, injured in the head, still alive, but struggling to breathe. Fortunately, a nearby nurse intervened, with help from another bystander, to pull the victim out of the car and provide first aid. They called emergency services and managed to keep the driver alive until paramedics arrived. The man was rushed to a medical center, where doctors did everything they could to save him. However, he tragically died just minutes after arrival. Law enforcement quickly secured the area and the vehicle. The driver's side window was shattered. The bullet entered through the cheek and exited the other side of the skull, breaking the passenger window. The deformed bullet was later discovered on the street near the car, while the cartridge case was found approximately 100 meters away from the parking lot. Witnesses, including a gas station employee, Carolyn Hyson, saw the victim arrive just before the attack. Shortly after, a motorcyclist pulled up, calmly approached the driver's side window, and attacked with weapons. Carolyn had a clear view of the criminal as he looked directly at her before he got on his motorcycle and rode away. He was a stocky man with dark hair, dressed entirely in black, resembling Ghost Rider, which seemed unusual for a summer day. However, he was wearing a helmet, so she couldn't see his face. Meanwhile, she was able to provide a detailed description of the motorcycle. It was a Street Fighter model, black and gray with neon green lights. She recalled that this distinctive man had been seen riding back and forth on the street multiple times, as if he was deliberately waiting for his target. After Carolyn reported the case at work, two managers ran out to the car. They were the ones who provided first aid and called an ambulance. The police quickly accessed the gas station's surveillance footage, but unfortunately, the quality was too poor to identify the attacker. They could see the motorcycle, but not its license plate. Detectives began investigating the identity of the murdered man to compile a list of potential suspects. To their surprise, they discovered that many people had negative opinions about him. Jeff was known to be difficult, hot-tempered, and often argued with neighbors over trivial matters. The investigation found that Jeff had several problematic business relationships and was involved with married women. He also had a criminal record. In 1981, he was convicted for running an illegal escort agency in Arizona. At the store where he frequently purchased supplies for his machines, people spoke poorly of him. He was notorious for flirting with attractive female employees, many of whom were schoolgirls working part-time. One witness recounted an incident involving a 17-year-old girl whom Jeff harassed to obtain her phone number. After she reluctantly provided it, he began calling her incessantly, offering money for intimate. This harassment continued until the girl's father intervened, threatening Jeff with legal action for corrupting a minor. There were other similar incidents, which contributed to his tarnished reputation. Detectives were aware of many individuals who might seek revenge against him. When the police arrived at Jeff's family's home to inform his wife about the incident, she was shocked and started to cry. They had been married for 15 years. Although she couldn't believe what had happened, she didn't appear especially surprised given her husband's controversial reputation and the many people who disliked him. Bonnie recounted the events of the day her husband was killed. That morning, Jeff was at home with his wife and son. He needed to go on his usual trip to check on the machines and restock them. Jeff asked his son for help, but the boy, upset with his father, refused. This prompted an argument between them, which Bonnie mentioned was a common occurrence. She herself was tired of the behavior of her husband, who treated her frankly badly. She admitted that she was thinking about divorce. Fortunately the teenager refused to help his father. It is possible that this saved his life. Typically, when disagreements arose, Jeff would react aggressively towards his son. During one instance, he attempted to involve Bonnie in an unpleasant discussion, but she chose to ignore him. He then claimed to have found a new woman who was superior to Bonnie in every way. She recognized this as another attempt to provoke her and continued to disregard his comment. To back up his claim, Jeff left the house, stating he was going to see his mistress. However, in reality, he went to wholesale warehouses to purchase items for vending machines. For several hours, he was in stores arranging merchandise, with this confirmed by witnesses and surveillance footage. The trips ended with a stop near a gas station where the killer acted quickly. There was reason to believe that Jeff was a big fan of lying. He frequently confided in a friend for the most intimate things. The police interviewed this friend, and he confirmed that Jeff tended to exaggerate his past to fit in with wealthier social circles. They also spoke with the victim's son. He supported his mother's account of a conflict with his father that morning. He struggled with mixed emotions regarding his parents. He loved his father, as they had grown closer recently. However, he was deeply troubled by his father's treatment of his mother, having witnessed years of emotional abuse and infidelity. The schoolboy really wanted to help find the killer. The numerous betrayals of Jeff seemed like a valuable clue. In addition, shortly before the massacre, Jeff deceived the contractors who were doing construction work. He paid them only about $7,000, less than the initial agreement, under a far-fetched pretext. However, these builders had a confirmed alibi. Bonnie stated that she didn't have specific suspicions about the killer, but she described Jeff as having a nasty and aggressive personality, which could lead him into trouble at any moment. She mentioned that he frequently received threatening messages and calls. One of the strange messages was saved on the answering machine, and she showed it to the police. It was received on Wednesday, June 13, at 2:55 p.m. from a man. According to Bonnie, when Jeff listened to the message, he became visibly agitated. Previously, he had taken such calls lightly, sometimes even joking about them, but this time he became restless and started pacing the room, deep in thought. Bonnie didn't know who the caller was, but she felt the voice on the recording sounded menacing. After the conversation, he said goodbye and mentioned they would speak again soon. Bonnie revealed that her husband left and went into hiding for several days after the call. He only returned home on Saturday morning, just before his death, and was in a very bad mood. The police interviewed all of Jeff's relatives and friends. Even his parents described Jeff as a swindler and a manipulator, someone unreliable, often distracted, who could also be involved in mischief and intimidation. During their investigation, officials discovered light illegal substances in Jeff's pockets, pointing to another area of inquiry. It seemed Jeff had connections to the criminal underworld, or perhaps he owed someone money, and this became the reason for the massacre. However, this line of investigation also led to no new findings. A forensic expert established more details surrounding the cause of death. The bullet entered through the right ear, damaging the oral cavity and causing severe bleeding. Within minutes, his lungs filled with blood, leading to choking. The wound itself turned out to be non-fatal. After talking to people involved with Jeff, the detectives eventually contacted the George, who had a close relationship with Jeff. They discovered that Cynthia was one of Jeff's mistresses, and their affair had lasted nearly a decade. This revelation drew significant attention during the investigation. The investigators also was revealed that Cynthia had a history of infidelity, maintaining several extramarital relationships. Before, when the detectives arrived at George's family mansion, Cynthia answered the door. She appeared disoriented, speaking slowly and in a confused manner. She claimed to already know about the murder because her husband showed her a newspaper that reported on Jeff's death on the front page. This event upset her. Cynthia was reluctant to answer many of their questions. She gave vague responses to some inquiries and ignored others altogether. Ed also responded evasively, denying any involvement of their family in the tragedy. They was clearly trying to avoid being connected to the investigation or appearing in police reports, as this could harm their reputation. Cynthia provided an alibi for both herself and Ed. Then that was verified. Surprisingly, Bonnie was fully aware of the affair between her husband and Cynthia. Jeff had informed his son about the relationship several years after it began. The reason for this disclosure was unclear. This painted a negative picture of Jeff's character. Bonnie suspected the affair as early as 1998, when she accidentally overheard a phone conversation between Jeff and Cynthia. Although she caught him being unfaithful, he managed to reassure her and deflect her concerns. Realizing she needed stronger evidence, Bonnie decided to spy on her husband and eventually confirmed her suspicions is right. By the end of 1999, Jeff confessed that he had been involved with Cynthia for 10 years. He claimed that their relationship had ended, and they were now just business partners. The mother of Jeff supported Bonnie's claims, stating that she was aware of her son's infidelities, including his involvement with Cynthia. Jeff frequently shared his personal thoughts with his mother, but she also insisted that he loved and respected Bonnie. After speaking with close friends of the George family, the police uncovered several intriguing details. Jeff met Cynthia at a club in 1991, where he pretended to be a doctor. When Cynthia discovered he was lying, he created a new story, claiming to be a special agent. This deception captivated Cynthia, a socialite. Interestingly, it was Cynthia who wrote the check to purchase the machines, not her husband. Her feelings for Jeff Stem was explained by Ed's preoccupation with work, which leaves her feeling neglected. Some suspected that Ed might have been aware of it for years. However, His strong Catholic beliefs prevented him from ending his marriage to the mother of his 7 children. Others thought he was completely unaware of the situation and blindly trusted his attractive wife. During the interrogation, the nanny shared valuable insights. She, describing Cynthia as self-centered, noted that Cynthia paid little attention to their children. She also saw Cynthia and Jeff, along with their children. She mentioned that Jeff treated his mistress similarly to how he treated his wife, including an incident where he hit Cynthia in public, leaving a bruise on her face. Additionally, it was revealed that Cynthia's youngest daughter might have been the result of an affair, as Jeff showed a lot of affection towards little girl and even took her for walks. It seemed unlikely that someone like him would invest time in another person's child. Due to these suspicions, Cynthia's youngest daughter had to undergo a DNA test, which confirmed that Jeff was indeed her father. After leaving the doctor's office with little girl, Ed stated that he didn't care about her biological parentage. He would love her, just like he loved his other children. Eventually, Cynthia admitted to having an affair with Jeff, but she kept her other secret relationships hidden. It's difficult to believe that Ed wasn't deeply troubled by his wife's infidelity at that moment. A few weeks before the murder, Ed tried to address some issues. He apparently suspected that Jeff was having an affair with Cynthia and wanted to protect her from him. However, Jeff refused the restraining order. Furthermore, Jeff's son reported that his father has shown fearful of Ed in the weeks leading up to the incident, making Ed the primary suspect. However, detectives lacked evidence to prove his involvement. Ed's alibi checked out, but this did not eliminate the possibility that he might have hired someone to commit the crime. A reward was offered for information regarding the murder. An informant, the ex-girlfriend of a man named John Zaffino, reached out to the police. She recalled that in 2001, John had mentioned beating up an Israeli. After hearing about the murder of Jeff Zak, who was identified as a former Israeli paratrooper with gray hair, she wondered if there was a connection. She contacted John, but he was evasive. It also came to light that John owned the same type of motorcycle that was seen at the scene of Jeff's murder. This prompts law enforcement to focus on the 36-year-old John, who had a reputation for being very cruel and dangerous. Immediately after, she ended the relationship because she feared for her safety. After experiencing multiple incidents of domestic violence, the woman decided to call John and asked several leading questions. Through their conversation, it became apparent that John might be involved in Jeff's death. She also engaged in several more similar phone calls, attempting to extract a confession from him, but he responded in a paranoid manner, avoiding direct answers. Upon investigating John, it was discovered that he had access to a .357 Magnum weapon, which was the same type as the Jeff's murder weapon. Interestingly, it was also confirmed by multiple witnesses that he knew Cynthia. The story is reenacted that Cynthia met John, an unemployed truck driver, in 2000, and they began an affair while she was still in a relationship with Jeff. 9 months later, in May 2001, she decided to end her relationship with Jeff and asked him to stop contacting her. However, Jeff was persistent and continued to call. Cynthia's husband noticed these unusual phone calls and suspected her. Whenever he picked up, the caller would hang up immediately. Ed did not want a public investigation and public attention to his private life, so he did nothing. Yet, he suspected that at the center of this problem was his wife's relationship with John. Details of their relationship become clearer when several expensive purchases give John are discovered. John claimed he was at a car dealership about 40 minutes from the crime scene at the time of the attack. However, the investigation revealed that he was actually on a mobile phone call and his location was tracked to a gas station. He only arrived at the car dealership 2 hours later. Investigators were able to track John's geolocation and review his phone records, leading them to suspect that Cynthia had ordered the crime. Adding to the evidence, a voice analysis confirmed that a threatening phone call received by Jeff was directed at John. The police believed that Jeff had begun threatening Cynthia when she decided to end their relationship, which he strongly opposed, which was quite consistent with Jeff's temperament. Feeling threatened, Cynthia decided to take action against him. On the tragic morning following an argument with his wife and son, Jeff looked up information about Cynthia, who he was deeply infatuated with and wanted to keep. The prosecution presented a clear narrative, but there was no evidence implicating Cynthia, so only John was taken into custody. John Zaffino's trial started on February 26, 2003. When called to testify on March 7, Cynthia chose to invoke her Fifth Amendment right, which allows her to avoid self-incrimination. Ed made the same choice. The main witness for the prosecution was John's ex-girlfriend, who detailed events from John's life leading up to the murder. The investigators also provided the murder weapon and confirmed that John owned it. Ballistic tests eliminated any doubts about this connection. However, there were no eyewitnesses identifying John as the perpetrator, nor was there any DNA evidence at the crime scene, which made the prosecutor's job more challenging. On March 10, 2003, after 4 hours of deliberation, John Zaffino was convicted of conspiracy to commit murder. He was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole. 23 years after the verdict, Bonnie approached John, stating that he was merely a pawn while Cynthia enjoyed a lavish lifestyle, asked if it was worth it. She likely hoped John would express his anger and reveal the truth, but he chose to remain silent. For a long time, the police lacked solid evidence against Cynthia. To bring her to justice, they gathered information about her involvement, piece by piece. On January 10, 2005, Cynthia was arrested while shopping. Ed posted bail of $2 million, allowing her to remain at home until her trial began in November 2005. The case gained momentum when new evidence emerged. Investigators discovered that John had planned to attack Jeff on May 8 while Jeff was relaxing in a national park. During this time, John was on a bridge talking on the phone with Cynthia for about 3 hours. She was also on another call with Jeff, coordinating their actions. The attack was interrupted when a park ranger noticed John's weapon case. When questioned, John claimed this was a misunderstanding and waiting for his girlfriend. A week later, a mushroom picker found a weapon in the park, which provided indirect evidence of Cynthia's involvement in the conspiracy. Ed hired a strong defense team of 5 lawyers for his wife, significantly reducing the prosecution's chances of success. During the trial, many revealing details emerged about Cynthia and her affair with John. The investigators was noted that Cynthia even paid for John's lawyers. One significant piece of evidence included recorded phone conversations between John and his sisters, which featured incriminating remarks in which he pressured Cynthia to uphold her part of their agreement. The defense argued that Cynthia had no reason to want Jeff dead and no motive to be involved in a murder plot. In contrast, the prosecution firmly claimed that Cynthia had a motive for the murder. After their breakup, Jeff tried to keep Cynthia in his life. They frequently argued, especially concerning their daughter, whom he threatened to take with him to Israel. Cynthia also felt at risk of their affair being revealed by Jeff, which could lead to her public humiliation. During the trial, 2 letters from Cynthia to John, who was in prison, were presented. These letters revealed their ongoing romantic relationship and showed that she remained deeply connected to him. In one letter, she sent him a Bible and expressed that she frequently prays for him. After facing public humiliation due to Cynthia's actions, Ed defended her against conspiracy charges. He emphasized his commitment to their marriage vows and refused to seek a divorce. Surprisingly, Cynthia chose not to testify in her defense, and John also did not take the stand. Ultimately, Cynthia was found guilty of conspiracy to commit murder and received, with the possibility of parole in a year. After the trial, Ed continued to defend his wife. He hired new lawyers who filed an appeal on her behalf. Cynthia served 16 months before she was released on March 22 after Ohio's 9th District Court of Appeals ruled that the circumstantial evidence presented by prosecutors, including phone records, correspondence, and financial documents, was insufficient to prove her guilty. Cynthia continues to live a normal life now. Welcome back to our channel. Today, we will explore a new case, the case of Nohema Graber. When a student at Fairfield High School received his Spanish test results, he found that his entire exam had been marked in red pen. He had failed because received a low grade. He was furious in front of his classmates, but the teacher reassured him, stating that she believed in his abilities and that he just needed to prepare better for the next test. Little did the elderly woman know that this would later have a tragic effect on her life. Fairfield is a small, quiet town in the southeastern part of the state of Quince, with a population of around 99,000 people. It features beautiful architecture and has about 12 parks and recreational areas, which is a significant number for a town of its size. One of these parks was a favorite walking spot for teacher Nohema Graber. She followed a daily routine of taking a certain number of steps to stay active and maintain her health, enjoying the tranquility and beauty of nature. However, on November 2, 2021, after finishing her workday, Nohema was tragically killed, leaving the residents of Fairfield in shock and fear. What a devastating event for their once peaceful town. Nohema was born on November 10, 1954, in Jalapa, Mexico, where she grew up in a loving family. From a young age, she was known for her openness and kindness. At the age of 20, Nohema began her career as a flight attendant for a major Mexican airline, which allowed her to indulge her passion for travel and an active lifestyle. She became one of the first women in Mexico to train as a pilot, paving the way for future female pilots in this challenging yet prestigious field. In 1985, at the age of 31, Nohema met Paul Graber, who was visiting Mexico on a business trip. They first encountered each other at a nightclub. After their meeting, Paul received Nohema's phone number and called her a few days later. Initially, he thought she was ignoring him, but she agreed to go on a date. Their relationship quickly blossomed into a romance. After a year of dating, on October 4, 1986, Nohema and Paul got married in Mexico. They then settled in Nohema's hometown, where she continued her work in the airline industry while Paul found a job in this new country. In 1991, after 5 years of marriage, the Graber family welcomed their first child, a son named Christian. A year later, they had another son, Jareth. Nohema, who was 37 and had worked for 17 years, decided to focus on her family. During the 1990s, the area where they lived became increasingly dangerous, prompting they to make the significant decision to leave Mexico and move to America, Paul's homeland. In 1992, they settled in Fairfield, where Paul found a well-paying job and supported the family, while Nohema became a stay-at-home mom. Soon after, she gave birth to their daughter, Naima. Nohema quickly adapted to life in the U.S. and began attending St. Mary's Catholic Church, where she made a donation and eventually became a community leader. As time went on, their children grew up and began to move out, leaving Nohema feeling bored and lacking purpose. Once she turned 50, she decided to pursue further education and enrolled at Westland University in Mount Plant, Iowa. There, she earned a degree in English and a teaching certificate. Nohema then secured a job at a high school in Oshkosh, Iowa, where she taught Spanish for several years, gaining valuable experience. In 2012, Nohema began teaching at Fairfield High School. Her students and colleagues appreciated her greatly, often speaking of her fondly. Graduates would send her postcards and letters, and she made it a point to respond, and always ending her replies with her signature message, "Be more confident." On November 2, 2021, after school, Nohema drove to the park. She was active and enjoyed walking, but that day she did not return home. Her husband, Paul, grew concerned when she didn't answer his calls. He went to the park and searched their usual spots, but he was unable to find her anywhere, and her car, a blue 1997 Honda Odyssey, was also missing. Feeling anxious, Paul promptly contacted the police to report. Right away, a search began in the park for Nohima. Her colleagues reported that she had not shown up for work, and since the previous evening, she had stopped responding to calls and messages. Meanwhile, students contacted the police with information about their classmate. They revealed that the night before, he had shared disturbing photos on social network. These photos were sent by Jeremy Goodale, a 16-year-old student at Fairfield High School. Born in 2005, Jeremy grew up in a dysfunctional family with 4 older siblings. His parents frequently argued and were often absent, leaving the older children to care for the younger ones. Eventually, the parents divorced. The mother moved in with another man, leaving her children behind to live with their father in the family home. The living conditions in the house were chaotic. It was filled with dirt and dust, flies buzzed around, and the bed linens had gone unchanged for months. They washed only once a week. The children lacked female care and love, so looked unkempt. Jeremy was described by his classmates as a quiet and modest boy who played on a baseball team. He didn't stand out much, except for his messy appearance. However, Jeremy faced more serious issues. He struggled with depression, anxiety, and attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. Doctors prescribed him medication to help. He studied Spanish with a teacher named Nohima, and his best friend was Willard Miller. Unlike Jeremy, Willard came from a wealthy family, but he found school challenging, particularly with foreign languages. Willard had recently transferred to Fairfield High School after attending a prestigious school with a tougher curriculum. On November 3, the body of Nohima was discovered near the railway in the north. She was lying on the ground wrapped in a tarpaulin, covered with old sleepers, various garbage, branches, and leaves. At the time of the discovery, she had died many hours ago. An initial examination revealed that Nohima died from blunt force trauma to the head. What does that mean? Her death was a homicide, and that her body had been deliberately concealed. Witnesses reported seeing Nohima's Honda Odyssey leave the park around 5:00 p.m. She had spent approximately 45 minutes there. However, the witnesses could not identify or describe the actual driver. Shortly afterward, the police found her blue Honda abandoned on a country road south of where her body was located. Another witness later came forward, stating they saw 2 young men walking along this same road around 5:30 p.m., heading back to the park. One of them was pushing an old garden wheelbarrow. Unfortunately, this witness could not describe the young men and did not remember their faces. Based on the suspicious photo that went viral, the police arrived at Jeremy's house. He seemed agitated. Although he knew that the teacher was missing, he was unaware that her body had already been discovered. He denied any involvement in her disappearance, but was not informed about what the police had found at his home. Detectives discovered a blood-stained baseball bat and several black hairs in his house. They also found clothes and a blood-stained terry towel belonging to him. On Jeremy's phone, they found a text file titled "Preparation," which detailed the items needed for a planned act, including rubber gloves, wet wipes, a backpack, a bag, a blanket, a garden wheelbarrow, and other supplies. The file also outlined a step-by-step plan of actions. After the officers finished inspecting Jeremy's house, they proceeded to Willard's home. At that time, Willard, like Jeremy, was unaware that their teacher had already been found dead. Willard remained calm during the police questioning and readily discussed how he and Jeremy had walked in the local park the previous evening. However, he became visibly nervous when the conversation shifted to Nohima. His demeanor changed as he mentioned that Nohima did not regard him highly and often underestimated him. Meanwhile, The community of Fairfield was shocked and mourned the passing of Nohema, as she was known to be kind, compassionate, and always helpful to her students, leaving everyone puzzled about why anyone would want to harm her. After searches of the houses, Jeremy Gudella and Willard Miller were arrested and taken into custody on suspicion of murdering their Spanish language teacher. During their interrogation, they were informed that the body had been discovered. Both provided similar accounts of the events. They admitted to walking in the park that afternoon when they encountered their teacher. They greeted her, but suddenly, a group of masked individuals attacked Nohema, hitting her on the head with a bat, causing her to lose consciousness and fall. Jeremy and Willard claimed they were forced to watch as the assailants continued to assault her. They alleged that they were then told to hide the body, take her car, and abandon it near a country road. Jeremy and Willard denied any wrongdoing, asserting that they were merely witnesses to the murder and had been compelled to obey the orders of the true criminals. However, evidence found in Jeremy's house suggested otherwise. The blood and hair found on the baseball bat, as well as the blood on Jeremy's clothes and towel, all belonged to Nohema. Furthermore, there were no witnesses who saw a group of masked individuals or any strangers in the park. A notebook discovered in Jeremy's house revealed that he and his friends had been stalking Nohema for several weeks. They recorded the times her classes ended, when she left school, how long she spent in her car, and where she went afterward. This detailed documentation of Nohema's schedule indicated that it was easy for them to predict her daily movements. The young men knew that Nohema walked in the park every day and were familiar with this route. They chose the right moment to attack Nohema while she was walking alone on a dark, deserted street. During questioning, Willard admitted that he disliked Nohema because he felt she always underestimated him. He acknowledged that he frequently argued with her during class, and his classmates had witnessed these confrontations. These two young men told conflicting stories. This time, Jeremy accused Willard of hitting Nohema, while Willard insisted he had not touched her, claiming that it was Jeremy who had killed her. During the investigation, the investigators was uncovered that on the day of the incident, Jeremy and Willard went to a park and concealed themselves in an out-of-the-way spot while they waited. When Nohema arrived, one of them struck her on the head with a bat, causing her to lose consciousness and collapse. The two then dragged her off the path and took turns assaulting her until she died. Afterward, they covered her body with branches and leaves before fleeing the scene in her car, which they abandoned on a country road. While walking, they made their way to Willard's house, where they took a garden wheelbarrow, a shovel, and a tarpaulin. They returned to the crime scene, wrapped the victim in the tarpaulin, placed her in the wheelbarrow, and transported her to the railroad tracks. There, they concealed the body by placing old railway sleepers, garbage, branches, and fallen leaves on top. Once the body was hidden, Jeremy and Willard returned home and attempted to clean up any evidence of their crime, believing they would never be discovered. Detectives discovered unusual search queries on Willard's phone, including, "Do students receive credit for a lesson if a teacher is seriously injured or dies during a course?" And, "What happens to students' work if a teacher dies mid-course?" Before the incident, Willard had planned a trip to Spain, but after receiving a low grade on a test, that trip became uncertain. Prosecutors viewed Willard as the main instigator of the crime, driven by a desire for revenge against the teacher, while his friend Jeremy appeared to be following Willard's lead. Additionally, Jeremy struggled with depression and anxiety, which made him emotionally vulnerable and easier to manipulate. This made him a more suitable accomplice for Willard's malicious scheme. During his trial in December 2021, Jeremy pleaded guilty to first-degree murder and agreed to testify against Willard. In his testimony, Jeremy claimed that Willard was the first to attack their teacher, Nohema Graber, on the afternoon of November 2, 2021, when they both invited her out. He stated that Willard pushed her, causing her to fall and sustain serious injuries. However, Jeremy also confessed that after Nohema lost consciousness, he used a baseball bat to strike her multiple times, resulting in her death. Jeremy claimed that he and Willard beat her together to ensure that Nohema would not survive. Throughout the trial, Jeremy continually cried and asked for forgiveness from the family of the deceased. He expressed deep remorse for what had happened. Willard also admitted his guilt, but maintained that Jeremy had delivered the first blow. In court, Willard was more composed. Like Jeremy, he sought forgiveness from the Greber family. He said, "I am truly sorry for the pain I caused you. I regret that your family is suffering because of me. I sincerely apologize from the bottom of my heart. I fully recognize the seriousness of my actions. I know I was wrong." Willard Miller was the first to be sentenced in June 2023, receiving a life sentence with the possibility of parole after 35 years. Sadly, another tragic event occurred following this story. Nohema's husband, Paul Graber, passed away in June 2023 from terminal cancer. Paul, 68, was buried the day before Willard's verdict was announced, and he never saw his wife's killers face justice. Paul's family and friends reported that he was deeply affected by his wife's death. They believed that if Nohema had been alive, she would have noticed Paul's illness early and sought timely treatment, which might have saved his life. In November 2023, Jeremy Goodale was found guilty in connection with the case of Nohema and sentenced to life in prison, with the possibility of parole after 25 years. During the trial, Jeremy was so distraught that he experienced a nosebleed and cried. He expressed regret, saying, "I wish I could turn back time to prevent this loss and the pain I caused the family. It was the worst decision of my life, and I take full responsibility for what I did." Nohema Graber had 3 adult children, brothers, sisters, nephews, and nieces, who certainly miss their beloved and caring mother. They fondly remember their mother and father. It is known that the sons and daughter forgave the murderers and try not to remember them. After their mother's death, one of the sons found their mother's personal diary. In it, she wrote short notes about her life, expressing that she loved teaching and adored her students very much. Nohema wrote that she would always smile and give her students support, stating that even if she could not teach them anything new, just looking at her would help the students learn to love life. Welcome back to our channel. Today we will explore a new case. The case of Aaron Barley. Kindness is not just a gift given, but sometimes also a double-edged sword if misplaced. When compassion is betrayed, will what we give become the seeds of a tragedy? Peter Wilkinson, 47, and his wife, Tracy, 50, lived in Stourbridge in the English county of Westminster. They had 2 children, a daughter, Lydia, who studied biology at Bristol University, and a son, Pierce, who was 13. Despite the fact that Lydia was much older and studying at university, away from the family, the brother and sister communicated every day and shared an extremely close relationship. Tracy Wilkinson was a generous and compassionate woman. A former Latin American champion in ballroom dancing, she became a volunteer to work with elderly people and could talk to anyone to make them feel at ease. She often helped the homeless and never refused to assist those in need. Tracy was a housewife while her husband had his own business. One day in March 2016, Tracy went to the supermarket to do her weekly shopping. After leaving, she noticed a young man named Aaron Barley who was sleeping on the street in a cardboard box. Seeing how he suffered from his situation, Tracy felt sorry for him and decided to invite him to her home on Greyhound Lane. Aaron had dinner with the Wilkinson family, and Tracy decided to do everything in her power to help him get back on his feet. She took Aaron to the city council office, and with their help, he managed to find new housing in a hostel. From that moment, Tracy always tried to ensure that Aaron had hot and fresh food. Such care and concern were extremely rare for Aaron, as his life had been chaotic from the very beginning. Born in 1993 as a result of incest, his parents were his uncle and niece, with a 19-year age difference. His mother worked in a factory, and his father was an innkeeper. By the age of 10, Aaron became an orphan. His father died of cancer when he was 4, and 2 years later, his mother had a heart attack, leading him to spend his entire childhood in orphanages and various foster families. During this period, he faced violence. When Aaron was 13 years old, he is at the center of an investigation into a missing person case, and his photo was circulated in the media after he went missing with 2 boys in Bromsgrove. Luckily, he was found and received proper medical care. As Aaron got older, he started sleeping on the streets. He also became addicted to banned substance and alcohol. However, it seemed that after meeting Tracy, his life started to improve. He appeared grateful for the help and support. Meanwhile, the Wilkinson family decided to do whatever it took to help him get through life as hard. One day during dinner with Wilkinson family, Aaron said that he just needed someone to give him a chance. Tracy herself has struggled with alcoholism in the past and was now volunteering at a rehab center that had helped her overcome it. She knew from her own experience how debilitating addiction could be and wanted to do everything she could to help him. Peter decided to get Aaron a job as a laborer at one of his businesses in Newport. For 5 months, it seemed that Aaron's life was getting better. He had a steady income, a roof over his head, and a family that truly cared about him. But soon, everything fell apart. In September, Aaron relapsed and started using illegal substances again. He explained that the reason was because his mother had recently passed away, but this was a complete lie. He became constantly drunk, stopped showing up for work on time, and exhibited aggression towards other employees. Peter decided to fire him. Everything ended peacefully, and the Wilkinson family lost contact with him. After only a couple of months, Peter found Aaron sleeping next to their house, covered in bruises, which indicated that he had been attacked. They decided to give Aaron another chance, helped him find a new place to live, and he earned money doing odd jobs for them. He spent Christmas with them and gave Tracy a card signed, "For the mother I never had." For the new year, Aaron had a new flat in Brierley Hill, and he now had a full-time job. A couple of times a week, he had dinner with the Wilkinson family, and it seemed that everything was getting better. Unfortunately, soon after, Aaron was fired from his job as a furniture polisher, and he lost his home. The Wilkinsons allowed him to stay with them again for 2 weeks until he found a job. On March 26, 2017, Lydia returned home from university and surprised her mother by hiding in the family Land Rover for Mother's Day. When Tracy opened the trunk and saw Lydia, they both cried tears of joy at their reunion. What a pity, Lydia's visit was brief, as she soon had to leave for Bristol to continue her studies. Just 4 days later, on March 30, 2017, at around 10:00 a.m., Lydia received a distressing call from her boyfriend informing her that a crime had occurred in her hometown. Upon reading the news, Lydia saw images of her house surrounded by police tape and emergency services. Alarmed, she immediately contacted the police to learn what had happened, and the news she received was horrifying. That day, Peter had taken his greyhound, Mendy, for their usual morning walk, leaving Tracy and Pierce at home. He had invited Pierce to join him, but Pierce declined, saying he would walk later. When Peter returned home, he noticed the house was unusually quiet, and there was no tea on the kitchen table, a routine his wife usually followed. As Peter entered the house, a man wearing a balaclava attacked him from behind the kitchen wall, raising a knife over his head. Peter suffered 6 stab wounds, 2 in his back, 2 in his stomach, and 2 in his face. During the assault, the attacker screamed, "Die," and curse. Although the attacker was trying to conceal his identity with the mask, Peter instantly recognized him. After the first stab, Peter pleaded, "We are trying to help you." But he responded with increasing rage, then shouting again, "Die," as he delivered another blow to Peter's stomach. Following the attack, Aaron stole the Wilkinsons' Land Rover parked outside and drove away. Despite serious injuries, Peter managed to call 911 and made his way to the garden, collapsing on a chair. Emergency services arrived in just 7 minutes. 2 ambulances and 2 helicopters were dispatched to quickly take the victims to hospital. When the police and medical staff arrived, they encountered a horrific scene inside the house. Peter directed them to Tracy and Pierce to check on their well-being. Police comments: Tracy had been stabbed at least 17 times and was found naked in her bedroom under a duvet, indicating she had been attacked while she was sleeping. She was pronounced dead at the crime scene. Her son, Pierce, suffered 8 stab wounds, one of which was so severe that it nearly ruptured his back. He was found gasping for air on the floor. Right away, Peter and Pierce was rushed to Birmingham for medical attention, but sadly, Peter lost both his wife and son. After police tracked the Wilkinson family's car, they quickly located Aaron. So, he was quickly apprehended. Why? A bloody knife wrapped in a wet shirt was also discovered in the car. For Lydia, the unfolding nightmare was unimaginable. She had planned to return home the following day to choose a dress for the university ball and had promised Pierce she would pick him up from school. Now, all those plans would never come to fruition. As soon as she arrived in her hometown, she went directly to her father before his life-saving surgery. Seeing him in the hospital, surrounded by medical equipment and tubes, was heartbreaking. While Peter fought for his life, Lydia had the painful task of identifying the bodies of her younger brother and mother. Lydia recalled, "I went into the house and sat with my mom and brother. I told them I was sorry I couldn't protect them and stroked their hair. I decided to stay there for a while because I knew it would be the last time I would see them." After the doctor's efforts, Peter survived and spent a total of 11 days in the hospital, 6 of which were in intensive care. The community in Stonebridge was shocked by such a horrific event in their town. In a show of respect, flowers were placed around Wilkinson's house. Many people came to express their sorrow. Meanwhile, the police obtained surveillance camera footage from Wilkinson's house, revealing a disturbing sequence of events. The footage showed Aaron climbing over the fence into the garden behind the house. He had been hiding in the garden shed all night after failing to break into the house. In the morning, he waited for Peter to leave for his usual walk, then crawled into the house on all fours to avoid detection. Once inside, he put on a balaclava to conceal his identity, took 2 knives from the kitchen, and went upstairs. There, he brutally stabbed Tracy multiple times in her bed and did the same to Pierce. After the attack, he hid to waiting for Peter to return. After the murder, Aaron showed no remorse. He told a police officer, "I stabbed 3 people. I didn't even bother to take any of you." He also mentioned to the police officer that he had chopped them all up and insisted he wouldn't require a lawyer. Additionally, Aaron declined to take a toxicology test that could have established if he was under the influence of banned substance that morning. He also refused to explain his motives. While in custody, he boasted about killing a mother and her son and expressed satisfaction that they were dead. His only regret was failing to kill Peter. One uncertainty is why he committed this crime. Less than a week before the murder, the Wilkinson family ended their contract with Aaron's phone service because he hadn't contacted them for 3 weeks. Tracy had also mentioned to friends that she saw Aaron peering over their garden fence and had wished for his disappearance from their lives. Investigators said, Aaron has a long history of violent and antisocial behavior. At the age of 11, he was abandoned by his foster family because of his aggressive actions towards other children. As he grew older, his violence escalated, particularly towards residents in the nursing home where he lived, and he claimed to be very disturbed. He frequently got into fights and even stole a staff member's car. At one point, he made a list of people he wanted to kill. Aaron has 21 prior convictions, the first occurring when he was just 12 years old for causing serious injury. His other offenses include assaulting a police officer, using illegal banned substance, and possessing illegal weapons. He once attacked his ex-girlfriend with a piece of wood, hitting her 50 times, and attempted to stab her after she broke the wood in half. For this assault, he was sentenced to 3 years in prison at the age of 18. Volunteers at the rehabilitation center where Aaron was held reported that he expressed a desire to kill someone with a knife. They also noted that he had 2 main goals: to kill a prison officer and to kill a police officer. However, his comments were largely dismissed since they believed he made these statements while under the influence of illegal banned substance. Before, he attended a special school, but his social interactions were limited, as everyone who knew him avoided him. Additionally, a police report was filed against him after his former foster guardian became alarmed by his Facebook posts. In one of these posts, he threatened his former family, with whom he claimed he hadn't spoken in years, and expressed a desire for specialized help, warning that he might commit mass murder if he didn't receive it. In February 2017, just a month before he murdered the Wilkinson family, he met with a project employee for support. This employee concluded that Aaron sought to manipulate the people around him and to have absolute control over them, calculating every step he took. In one of his text messages, Aaron wrote that he was a beast, adding, "Stay a beast, change the victim." On Wednesday, June 7, 2017, Pierce and Tracy Wilkinson's funeral was held at St. Mary's Church. Lydia and Peter decided to bury both of their loved ones in the same coffin. The priest who presided over the ceremony was moved to say, "You may be surprised to see only one coffin, but they are forever inseparable, just as they were together when they were alive." On the first day of his trial at Birmingham Crown Court, Aaron pleaded guilty to 2 counts of murder and 1 count of attempted murder. As the judge read the charges against him, Aaron rocked back and forth in the dock and shouted, "I did what I did. I don't have to stand here and lie." Psychiatric evaluations found no grounds for mitigating Aaron Barley's guilt. Prosecutor Kareem Khalil described Aaron as deceitful and manipulative. One of Aaron's former caregivers noted that he could be sensitive and caring, but he could also be cruel and threatening. A former resident of the nursing home where Aaron lived said that, aside from anger, he rarely showed any emotion. They never saw Aaron cry and noted that he rarely seemed affected by anything that happened around him. They observed that Aaron was the type of person who could witness terrible things happening and still stand still, not crying, not worrying. He seemed physically present, but completely detached emotionally. Aaron's attorney argued that Aaron's childhood was unstable, preventing him from staying in one place for long. He claimed that Aaron had borderline personality disorder and felt abandoned by his family. However, this diagnosis was never confirmed because it was widely acknowledged that the Wilkinson family had treated him with exceptional kindness. In court, Lydia Wilkinson confronted Aaron, stating, "My parents helped you, and you repay them with emotional suffering. You ruined lives and took half of my family away. I have become a shadow of my former self. Sometimes I wake up wishing I wasn't here. What did they do to deserve such a fate?" She also expressed that she would never forgive Aaron for his actions. After her statement, it appeared that Aaron began to cry and softly said, "And I'm very sorry." The judge commended Lydia for her courage and maturity, noting that she had shown strength beyond her years. However, he pointed out that Lydia was struggling with anxiety attacks and could no longer be left alone. Peter, who also testified, expressed confusion about Aaron's actions, saying, "We have no explanation for what he did. He chose to take out his frustrations on the people who cared for him. I wish I had never met him. I wish my wife hadn't seen him in the cardboard box." Aaron Barley was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum of 30 years before he would be eligible for parole. While the judge gave him this opportunity, she also warned him that Aaron might never be released, depending entirely on his behavior and rehabilitation while serving his sentence. However, Aaron remained expressionless throughout the trial, showing no reaction. The 3-judge panel then decided to increase the minimum sentence to 35 years, reflecting the severity of Aaron's crimes. Now, Aaron will only be eligible for parole after serving at least 35 years and proving that he is no longer a threat to society. Whether or not he will ever be free is a question that only time will tell. Peter and Lydia continued to live in their home on Greyhound Lane. Peter said, "This is our home, and we couldn't let him take anything else away from us. We love this house. It's like a family home that we built ourselves, and we love living here." They also received support from a local priest, who blessed each room in the house. Lydia returned to university with the hope of becoming a medical researcher. She said she wanted to continue the work her mother would do, helping and supporting others, and that it was important to her to focus her energy on making something positive out of the tragedy. Lydia raised £133,000 British for Birmingham Children's Hospital, which fought so hard to save her brother's life. While the loss of Tracy and Pierce can never be replaced, but their legacy will live on through the children that Lydia's organizations have cared for. Welcome back to our channel. Today we will explore a new case. The case of Debany Escobar. These events took place in the state of Nuevo León, Mexico, on April 9, 2022. A disturbing image appeared on social media. In the photo, a young girl was standing on the side of the road. She was wearing a white top, brown shorts, and black Converse shoes, and her hair was down. The caption of the post with the photo said, "Yes, it's true." The girl's name was Debany Escobar. She was 18 years old. The last time she was seen was late on the night of April 9 after a party where she was with her friends. It all started on Friday, April 8, when Debany, a student at the Faculty of Law at the University of Nuevo León in Monterrey, decided to go for a walk with her friends. At about 11 p.m., she left her house. Two of her friends, Sarai and Vaughn, met her on Simon Bolivar Street to go to a party together. At 11:30 p.m., a CCTV camera from one of the stores recorded how the three girls were buying drinks. They were there for some time and then decided to go to the party just a few blocks away. However, upon arrival, they found themselves in an unpleasant situation, which led them to decide to go to another party taking place at the Quinta Diamante estate in General Escobedo. They ordered a taxi using the Didi app, which came to pick them up at 12:49 a.m. When they arrived at the location, it became clear that the party had already ended. However, the girls noticed that not far away, on the same street, another party was taking place, called Cantal Diamante. The surveillance Sierra footage shows the girls getting out of a white Kia Rio at 1:20 a.m. And only Sarai and Debany exited the car. A little later, they reached the entrance to the club. After 9 minutes, the camera filmed Debany walking in the opposite direction from the entrance. After a few seconds, she returned and everything seemed fine. But at 3:45 a.m., the camera recorded Debany running out of the club. A young man ran after her and tried to grab her. She hit him and tried to run away, but he did not let her. After that, they began to quarrel, and another guy came out to witness the altercation. After that, the girls called a familiar driver to pick them up. The driver informed her that he was nearby and would arrive in 10 or 15 minutes. A moment later, when the driver arrived, Debany got in the car, leaving her friends behind. Another camera recorded the car, showing that Debany was arguing with the driver. 8 minutes later, the driver sent a message to her friend stating that Debany had exited the car and refused to continue the ride. The driver informed that there had been an argument between him and Debany, due to which she chose to leave the car and did not want to return. He took the photo as proof that he left her on the side of the road. Debany's friends were uncertain about what to do next. They asked the driver to contact the police, but he declined, stating he had to leave for work. A few minutes later, he returned to the area, but Debany was no longer there. He informed her friends that she was missing and suggested that Debany appeared to be in poor condition, potentially under the influence of banned substance, as her speech was incoherent. The friends attempted to contact her parents, but no one answered. The conversation between the driver and Debani's friends ended at 5:16 a.m., and since then, they had not heard from her. The next day, Debani's friends were able to contact her father, Mario Escobar, they wanting to find out what had happened. Her parents were also unaware of the situation, and they promptly filed a report with the police. Photos of Debani were shared on social media, and a search effort began. On April 9, while authorities were looking for Debani, the body of a missing girl named Maria Fernanda Contreras was discovered in a house in the Apodaca area. This was one of 5 bodies found during the search for Debani. Within just 6 days, the remains of these 5 women were uncovered, which left the community in shock. 2 days after Debani went missing, a girl who was also at the party that Debani attended told on her Instagram that some people tried to help Debani and offered to take her home so that she could come to her senses. However, Debani's friend did not want this, since supposedly some trusted person was supposed to come for them, so the story took on a different character. Now Debani's friends were the main suspects. All this was very strange, and as time went on, the case became more and more complicated. At that point, the investigation had made little progress. On April 15, a reward of 100,000 Mexican pesos was announced for information about Debani. From this reward, the prosecutor's office in Nuevo León obtained a video showing Debani at 4:29 a.m., just 4 minutes after the driver had photographed her. In the video, she is seen walking toward the building of the international transport company Alcocia. She then crossed the road and approached the building's facade and vanished. With access to this video, it was believed that Debani might have gone to the transport company for help. However, the camera did not capture her entering or exiting the building. This was the last footage of Debani, leading to suspicions that the transport company could be involved in her disappearance. So, there was still hope of finding Debani alive. On April 19, the police initiated a search of the Alcocia company building. They examined all vehicles and accessed surveillance cameras, but found nothing of interest. Following this, they conducted a search in a residential building in central Monterrey, located 22 kilometers from where Debani was last seen. The police received tips that Debani's personal belongings were in apartment number 18. 2 days earlier, the GPS on her phone indicated activity in that location, as well as at the corner of the Nueva Castilla motel. The following day, police, volunteers, and canine units searched the nearby highway for evidence. They inspected a manhole in a vacant lot next to the Nueva Castilla motel. Additionally, workers from the Monterrey Water Service searched a manhole along the highway where she was last seen. However, at that point, the investigation had made little progress. At the request of Mario, a team from the National Search Commission was called in to assist with the search. That Thursday afternoon, a group of volunteers joined the effort. Police received reports from the staff at the Nueva Castilla motel about a foul odor coming from an unused tank. Officers quickly arrived at the scene, and within minutes, they discovered a body. Although it was initially unclear if the body belonged to Debani, divers confirmed that it was wearing the same clothes she had on the day she went missing. Mario identified her by a cross she was wearing. The police also requested security camera footage from the motel, but the staff claimed the cameras only displayed live footage and did not record. Meanwhile, Debani's body had been submerged in water for nearly 2 weeks, making it nearly unrecognizable and in a state of decomposition. Despite the clothing and accessories, DNA testing was necessary for identification. An autopsy conducted confirmed that the body was indeed Debani's, and the cause of death was determined to be a severe head injury by strong impact. Initial reports suggested that Debani's fall into the tank was not accidental, and her phone lost signal shortly after. There were no signs of violence on her body. The bruises might have been caused by a fall. However, there was swelling on her forehead and around her eyes, indicating inflammation from impact. At that time, it was believed that Debani could not have jumped over the 2-meter-high wall surrounding the motel to accidentally fall into a cistern that measured 90 by 98 centimeters. and was 4.43 meters deep, with a water level of 90 centimeters. Because Debanye was only 167 centimeters tall, and the wall had barbed wire on top. Before the discovery, Debanye's body, no one, including service dogs, noticed any unpleasant odors at the motel. Nueva Castilla had 3 tanks, with one of them clogged. In the first tank, where the body was found, they found her Converse sneakers and a piece of fabric with insects typically found on decomposing bodies. On the wall between the first and second tanks, a bag belonging to Debanye was located. This bag contained a red plastic container, a white bra, 2 pieces of beige fabric, and a black and white fabric mask. In the second tank, investigators found a yellow and white lighter, 3 metal keys, a cell phone in a damaged black case, a wallet, and a plastic-wrapped gel-like substance. Conducting toxicology tests to check for alcohol or other substances in her system proved difficult. However, the presence of insects and worms feeding on the corpse might allow for DNA extraction to identify substances. The investigation agency analyzed that Nueva Castilla Motel is not well known and appears abandoned from the outside. It sits along the highway leading to New Laredo, the main route between Monterrey and the United States. This highway has earned a reputation for danger, as approximately 1,000 people went missing there last year. They found no signs of a break-in near the tanks, leading them to conclude that Debanye likely entered the motel through the main entrance of the restaurant. 2 days after the body was found, security camera footage from the motel was released. This was unusual because the staff had previously stated that the cameras only recorded in real time. The footage provided by the prosecutor's office shows the motel's restaurant and 2 glass doors, one facing the highway and the other leading to the tank area inside the motel. In the footage, Debanye is seen entering the motel at 4:33 a.m. Another camera captures her running to the motel, going around the restaurant, and reaching the glass door. When she noticed no one was there, she dashed to the corner of the restaurant, where she stayed for about 20 minutes. Then, she ran again along the wall of the hotel. This was the last confirmed sighting of her alive. Following a review of the surveillance footage, the prosecutor's office requested that the motel be placed under check. Investigators discovered that an outdoor camera at a neighboring restaurant recorded a car parked at the Nueva Castilla Motel, where a man entered. It was believed that this man took Debanye away in that car. Days later, the car was identified, and the man who got in was also revealed. However, after being questioned, he was declared innocent of the case. Meanwhile, Mario sought external assistance to carry out a second autopsy and compare its findings with those of the first. Everyone was left wondering why Debanye exited the taxi that was supposed to take her home. New footage that surfaced in the media suggested that her departure might have been prompted by harassment from the taxi driver. In the video, the driver is seen extending his right hand toward the girl's chest, leading to speculation that she left the car due to his inappropriate behavior. In response to these allegations, taxi driver Juan appeared in the media on April 27 to share his side of the story. In the interview, Juan David denied any harassment, explaining that the footage actually captured him handing Debanye a phone charger because her phone battery had died. And he said his conversations with Debanye's friend, he shared an audio recording he made while Debanye was in his car. In the recording, she states, "My parents deserve the truth." Juan explained that she got into the car because she felt her friends from the party were bad influences. They didn't want to see her off. Debanye started crying, and Juan noted that she appeared to be in distress, possibly under the influence of banned substance, as her speech was unclear. He mentioned that, when he requested her home address to take her there, but she didn't respond. He then asked her friend for Debanye's mother's phone number, but they didn't have one. While driving on the highway, Debanye unexpectedly asked him to stop the car and then exited. Juan tried to persuade her to return while she stood by the roadside, but she did not come back. Then, he took a photo of Debanye and sent it to Debanye's friends to alert them to her location. 2 of Debanye's friends also gave an interview on television. The girls mentioned that at the party, Dabani was aggressive and did not accept help from anyone. She asked to be left alone. Sarai learned that Dabani had a disagreement with a group of people who wanted to take her home, which caused her to act oddly. Her friends suspected that something was wrong with her drink at the party, leading to her withdrawal from socializing with others. Eventually, she ran out of the club, and some guys tried to stop her. Others also came out to assist Dabani, but she reacted aggressively and insisted that they leave her alone. She mentioned that her parents were lawyers and offered money to anyone who would let her be. The girls ordered a taxi, using the same driver they had trusted before. When the taxi arrived, only Dabani got in, while this driver is different from the driver they want to see again. After leaving the party, the girls attempted to call Dabani's father multiple times between 3:50 a.m. and 4:30 a.m., but he did not answer. It wasn't until 8:35 a.m. that they finally reached him to ask if Dabani had made it home, only to discover that she was missing. One significant piece of evidence that prompted further investigation was a promotional video from the motel, which featured a song. The video not only showcased the motel, but also zoomed in on room 174. This raised suspicions that a motel worker might have been hinting at what happened in that room. As a result, the initial search lasted about 7 hours and yielded some evidence, along with previously overlooked surveillance footage. At the request of Dabani's parents, room 174 was examined for blood traces, both inside the room and in the parking lot. The prosecutor's office announced that 5 individuals present at the motel that night have already been interviewed. A white truck was noted to have arrived shortly after Dabani entered the hotel grounds. However, the last 8 or 9 minutes of the footage were missing, and they might contain crucial clues for solving the case. Experts are currently working to recover the potentially deleted records. On May 5, it was reported that Dabani's ID stolen from her 2.5 months prior during a robbery was discovered. A resident of Building 15, where a search had already taken place, found the ID in a flower bed of the residential complex. Nonetheless, this find has not yet contributed to solving the case. Then, new information was reported in the media. Mario accused the Nuevo Leon prosecutor's office of hiding the results of a second autopsy on Dabani's body. In there, the findings indicate that she did not suffer multiple blows to the head from blunt objects. However, medical examiners noted bruises on both sides of her head, her forehead, both eyelids, the left side of her nose, her lips, and around her ears. The report suggests that the varying severity of head injuries was likely caused by external impact, pointing to the likelihood that these injuries were inflicted by another person, this indicating a violent death rather than an accident. Furthermore, it was determined that Dabani died before entering the water, as no water was found in her lungs. The report also revealed bruises and hematomas in the genital area, suggesting abuse violence. It dismissed the possibility of strangulation since there were no injuries to her neck. This has highlighted the persistent negligence of the police. It is troubling that, in today's world, the authorities are not trustworthy. The case of Dabani Susana Escobar is not only a personal tragedy, but also a powerful reminder of the violence against women in Mexico. To date, no one has been arrested or charged in connection with her death, leaving her family and the public questioning the justice system and the safety of women in society. Dabani has become a symbol of the fight against gender-based violence, a problem that affects an average of 10 women every day in Mexico. Despite protests and constant pressure from the community, the investigation and prosecution process has been slow, leaving the quest for justice for these young women a significant question mark. Dabani's death has not only left her family heartbroken, but has also sparked outrage and a determination for change in society. But will this voice and struggle be enough to bring justice and end similar tragedies? The answer still lies in the future. Hey detectives! Welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Russell Rusty and Rebecca Becky Porter. Russell Rusty and his wife, Rebecca Becky Porter, bought a farm in Willard, Missouri, USA, in 1957. At the time, it was a small settlement with a close-knit community where everyone knew one another. The crime rate was low, and life was peaceful, quiet. On April 19, 2011, Rebecca, aged 40, unexpectedly missed her scheduled shift at work. She hadn't mentioned any health issues beforehand, which raised concern among her coworkers and later her supervisors. That morning, the family's neighbors stepped out onto the porch and noticed Rebecca's car still parked outside. Rebecca typically left for work early, as she usually woke up at around 7:30 and left the house by 8 a.m. Thinking she might be feeling unwell, the neighbor decided to check on her. However, when he knocked on the door, there was no answer. At first, he assumed she might be resting due to fatigue and didn't think much of it. But as the day went on and the house remained silent, his concern began to grow. Later, Rebecca's daughter, Jessica, arrived at the house, concerned because she hadn't been able to reach her mother by phone. The neighbor informed Jessica about the unusual situation. Together, they knocked on the door, but still, no one answered. When they peered through a window, they saw the house in disarray, leading them to contact the police. Their call followed an earlier one placed by Rebecca's son, who had already reached out to law enforcement after being unable to contact his mother. He expressed his concern and requested a welfare check for the Porter family. When the patrol arrived at the house, they were immediately hit by a strong smell of cleaning products, noticeable even from the porch. The officers inspected the property and peered through the windows. Inside, they found the house in total disarray, particularly in the kitchen and the main bedroom. In the bedroom, the bed was out of order, the mattress tilted, the blanket pulled off, and belongings like a handbag and a mobile phone scattered across the floor. There were clear signs of a struggle, which made the house resemble a crime scene. In the kitchen, they discovered a cut window screen, suggesting it might have been used as the entry point for a burglary. The situation seemed to point to a break-in. However, upon entering the house, the officers uncovered something that didn't support the burglary theory. Surprisingly, many valuable items were untouched despite the chaotic state. Rebecca and Russell were nowhere to be found, fueling suspicions of foul play. The police's findings prompted them to seal off the area and launch an investigation into possible kidnappings. When Rebecca's son arrived at the farm, he assisted the police by providing helpful insights. What deeply concerned him was the presence of his stepfather's medication, which was still at the house. Russell, his stepfather, relied on these pills every day after medical treatment, and Russell would never leave them behind if he left the house. Rebecca's wallet, which she always carried with her, was found in the marital bedroom. Her car remained parked outside the house, and inside the car were her bank cards, with the key left in the ignition. This raised serious concerns, as it was clear something alarming had occurred. Although the house had a strong smell of cleaning products, only one bottle of bleach was found, and it was still full. No empty containers of cleaning products were discovered, yet it was evident they had been used very recently. This seemed suspicious. Someone had likely discarded them after use. It appeared the perpetrator had quickly poured bleach over various areas in an attempt to erase evidence, with pools of bleach still visible in some spots. The police found a computer monitor under the table, but the rest of the system was missing. It appeared to have been disassembled, as some wires were still present. Upon investigation, the police discovered that this computer managed multiple cameras located both inside and outside the house. The theft of the system unit meant all the stored data had also been taken. It was clear the perpetrator had stolen the evidence to prevent it from falling into the detectives' hands. Additionally, it was determined that all the cameras were connected to a single security system. The system had sent out an alarm prior to the incident, but no response was received. Investigators noted the unusually large number of CCTV cameras, which covered the entire property without any blind spots. Such extensive security measures in a quiet, safe neighborhood raised suspicions. Many assumed the system was installed to comfort Rebecca, whose nerves and fearfulness had grown with age. However, the situation was concerning since they lived in an area where residents were familiar with one another and serious crimes had not occurred in years. The police theorized that they might have felt threatened or frightened by someone, possibly an enemy, who acted against them. The stolen cleaning products indicated that the criminal might have been trying to erase evidence of blood, leading investigators to fear the worst. However, Rebecca and Russell's children rejected this idea. They argued their parents had no enemies, were peaceful by nature, and rarely engaged in conflicts, let alone provoke someone to commit a crime. The neighbors were also shocked by the news. The Porters were viewed as deeply religious and upstanding people, attending church every Sunday and frequently participating in neighborhood events. They seemed friendly to everyone. However, people who knew the family better informed police about Russell's troubled past. Before meeting Rebecca, he had struggled with alcohol and substance addiction, which raised the possibility of him relapsing into old habits, accruing debts, or associating with dangerous individuals. However, there were no recent signs of such behavior. Rebecca made great efforts to help Russell overcome his problems and prevent relapse. Many neighbors heard these speculations, and rumors began spreading. Some even believed a Mexican cartel might have been involved in Rebecca and Russell's disappearance. Meanwhile, the police explored different possibilities, such as one spouse harming the other and fleeing, or both voluntarily ending their lives together. Bloodstains were discovered in the house despite attempts to clean, reinforcing the police's theory of a violent crime. However, even by the third day of the investigation, there were no concrete leads or evidence. Rebecca and Russell were officially declared missing, and the search efforts intensified. Authorities suspected at least one person had been harmed in the house. Suspicion grew as both spouses had left behind essential personal belongings they used daily, suggesting they might both be victims. Neighbors and friends were left wondering and trying to figure out what had happened to Rebecca and Russell. Everyone was bewildered by their sudden and inexplicable disappearance. As more time passed without any sign of them, anxiety grew among family members and local residents. Disturbing rumors spread throughout the community, creating fear among the public. Approximately 5,000 flyers featuring pictures of Rebecca and Russell were printed. Family members and volunteers distributed them widely, placing them at gas stations, grocery stores, truck stops, and other areas frequented by locals. The local cycling community has joined in the search effort, assisting by interviewing residents for clues to Rebecca and Russell's whereabouts. A reward has been offered, and detectives have been working closely with relatives and friends of the family to gather information about the surroundings, identify possible suspects, such as the kidnapper or killer. They also investigated any recent or past conflicts the Porters might have had with other people. Through this, it was revealed that a family member, Robert Campbell, had been involved in a dispute with Russell. Robert, who drove a pickup truck, lived near the Russells and became the primary suspect in their disappearance. Detectives begin investigating his life and relationships, uncovering a long-standing conflict between him and the Russell family. Their disputes often escalated into heated arguments, and about 3 weeks before Rebecca and Russell vanished, the tension reached a breaking point. Both parties obtained restraining orders against each other. Naturally, detectives approached Robert at his home to question him about the incident leading up to Rebecca and Russell's disappearance. It was revealed that Robert had been claiming ownership of the family farm, even though he had no legal rights to it. Previously, Robert had lived on the property until new owners, Russell, who inherited the farm from his grandfather, and his wife Rebecca, moved in. Robert was upset by this, believing that, as the former owner's son, he was entitled to the property. However, he had been excluded from the will due to strained family relationships. Most of the conflict revolved around the farm. Robert proposed splitting the farm with Russell, but Russell refused and presented the ownership documents. This refusal fueled Robert's resentment. Robert believed his claims were valid because, prior to Russell and Rebecca moving in, he had worked on the house. He had renovated the facade, built a second floor, and invested time, money into improving the property. Nevertheless, when Russell took over, they effectively evicted him and dismissed his investments as irrelevant. Rebecca and Russell explained to Robert that, according to the legal documents, he had no rights to the property. His investments did not entitle him to any portion of the farm. Despite this, Robert felt wronged. He demanded that Rebecca and Russell either vacate the property, share ownership, or at least compensate him for his expenses. Unfortunately, they were unable to reach any form of agreement. The situation escalated, and it was clear that no resolution would come from the Supreme Court. This created an opportunity for Robert to remove both Rebecca and Russell, as well as seize their property. Detectives observed that Robert was behaving very possessively toward the property that originally belonged to Russell's grandparents and had not been passed down to him. He held deep resentment toward the family, particularly Rebecca and Russell. Eventually, due to ongoing conflicts, he moved his new trailer about half a kilometer away from the farmhouse. Robert seemed to have a strong motive for violent actions, including an attack, kidnapping, or even murder, given the long-standing disputes with the family. Although Robert denied any involvement in Rebecca and Russell's disappearance, claimed that he had an alibi, the evidence complicated matters. On the day of the incident, he was reportedly 150 kilometers away in another city on a business trip with his wife. Despite this alibi, police appeared to piece together a narrative suggesting his involvement. Robert, who lived only a few hundred meters away from the Russells, openly expressed interest in their property and became subject to a restraining order. The farm's CCTV cameras were likely installed due to concerns about him. Witnesses confirmed frequent arguments between Robert and the family. On one occasion, he was seen driving by their home, yelling out the window that their time there was limited, perceived by some as a threat. It was plausible that Robert could have hired someone to carry out the crime since he had a clear motive and might have wished to avoid direct involvement. But could he really harm his own relatives and their spouse? As investigations dug deeper, it was revealed that Robert harbored significant resentment toward them as recently as a year before their disappearance. Rebecca had previously been married before meeting Russell. Her first husband, Terrence, was a local church pastor. Their divorce was complex and highly controversial. 4 months after the split, Rebecca met Russell. At that time, Russell was battling an addiction to illegal substances and alcohol. However, after meeting Rebecca, she became a positive influence in his life, like a breath of fresh air. From the very beginning, she seemed determined to help him overcome his struggles. Russell later admitted that her presence gave him a renewed sense of purpose. Rebecca was more than 10 years older than Russell, which initially unsettled his family. However, they eventually accepted the relationship. On the other hand, Rebecca's family reacted much more negatively. Following her divorce, Rebecca lived with her children and parents, but they strongly disapproved of Russell. As a result, her children stayed with their grandparents and distanced themselves from their mother, upset by her decision to pursue a relationship with a much younger man who had serious addiction issues. In fact, they refused to attend Rebecca and Russell's wedding. The ongoing discord between Rebecca and Terrence wasn't unusual and didn't initially seem like a strong motive for the attack. However, the intricate divorce process brought up several questions, especially concerning a restaurant they had opened and co-owned during their marriage. Neither of them wanted to split the business during the divorce, which could have provided a financial motive for Terrence to target her and her new husband, Russell. At this stage of the investigation, detectives had not identified any other potential suspects. The focus shifted to 2 individuals, Uncle Robert Campbell, who had a strained relationship with Russell, and ex-husband Terrence Fraser, who might have financial grievances against Rebecca. Investigators approached Terrence, a church pastor, to learn more about his recent interactions with Rebecca. Unlike Robert, Terrence appears genuinely distressed from the start and seems deeply saddened by Rebecca's disappearance. His behavior stood in stark contrast to Robert's and showed no signs of recent conflict. Terrence had moved on with his life and appeared content, expressing sincere regret over the disagreements during their divorce. He admitted he could have been kinder at times and acknowledged his past mistakes with genuine remorse. The police continued to stay in contact with Rebecca's and Russell's relatives and friends during the investigation. One of Russell's friends shared some intriguing information. The family's property had been targeted by multiple crimes in the past. This suggested they might have had more enemies than anyone had realized. For instance, a few months before the disappearance, there had been an incident of agricultural theft on their farm. In response, Russell had installed video cameras on the property. Robert was also investigated for possible involvement. However, it was confirmed that he couldn't have committed the crime during that time because he was far from the city. Despite this, his intense dislike for Russell raised suspicions that he might have orchestrated the crime. At the time of the incident, Robert was working as a truck driver and was traveling to Texas. Separately, Terrence was also ruled out as a suspect through further checks. This led to the theory that the Porters might have had other, less obvious enemies unknown to the police. Eventually, the investigation appeared to hit a dead end. About a week after Russell and Rebecca disappeared, an unexpected development occurred. Early one morning, the station received a call reporting that Donald and Helen Willingham had been found stabbed to death in their home. The police immediately noticed several similarities between this case and the Porters. Both homes were broken into without warning, nothing of value was stolen, and the level of brutality was extreme. However, unlike the first incident, the bodies in this case were not removed, nor was there an attempt to clean up the crime scene. The reason? A neighbor had frightened the perpetrator. The witness even chased a man wearing a black hoodie for a short while but failed to catch him. The suspect managed to escape, but the neighbor promptly reported the incident to the police around 5 a.m. The investigation into the second case revealed troubling parallels. The Willingham family bore a striking resemblance to the Porters. Both women, Helen and Rebecca, were actively involved in their local church. Helen was married to Donald, the local church pastor, just as Rebecca had once been. This raised fears of a possible serial killer or a connection between the two families. Despite intense efforts by law enforcement, progress in both investigations was limited. The police thoroughly examined the relatives of the Willingham family, their close acquaintances, and the timeline leading up to the crime. As in the case of the Porter family, several suspects were identified, but each was ruled out after further questioning. Both cases appeared to be at a standstill until July 2011, when the situation took a turn. In that month, a man named Jose Huckleberry was taken into custody at the station, accused of committing a burglary in Greene County. During a 7-hour interrogation, he confessed to killing Donald and Helen but denied having any role in the disappearance of Rebecca and Russell. Eventually, investigators confirmed he could not have been responsible for the Porters' disappearance, as he had a solid alibi. Both the cases of the Porter family and the Willingham family exhibit striking similarities and notable differences, particularly regarding the motives and methods of the murderer. As a result, Jose was removed from the list of suspects in the Porters family case. Later, a police informant who had recently been released from prison claimed to possess valuable information regarding the disappearance of Rebecca and Russell. The informant stated that a prisoner named Tony had boasted during a conversation that he took away the birthdays of Rebecca and Russell, a phrase in criminal slang meaning that he killed them. Although the detectives were skeptical of this claim, they decided it was worth continuing to investigate the lead. The police began investigating Tony. They first reviewed the location data from his mobile phone to determine whether he might have been near the Porters family's residence on the night of their disappearance. In parallel, they delved into Tony's background. The inquiry revealed that he had a history of burglary, primarily targeting electronics and household appliances. Notably, his criminal patterns seemed to align with the theft of items from the Porter family's home, including a computer system unit, potentially linking him to the case. At the time of the investigation, Tony was in jail awaiting charges for another burglary. Detectives arranged to speak with him directly, but Tony denied any involvement in Rebecca and Russell's disappearance. The family recounted Tony's tumultuous past, claiming that he had experienced problems from a young age. He had consistently found himself in trouble and had been connected to the criminal world since his school years. Investigators interviewed Tony's family and uncovered a long-standing conflict among the family members. Some relatives hadn't seen Tony for years and were unaware of his circumstances. Others, like his cousin Dusty Hicks, remained in contact and actively cooperated with the investigation. Eventually, Tony revealed he might have information about a crime involving the Porters. He told the police he could lead them to a location where the Porters' bodies might be hidden, an old hut in the forest. Tony led the police to the site. As they neared the hut, a foul odor grew stronger. Once inside, the smell was overwhelming. In the floorboards, they found a hole concealing a grave filled with garbage and human remains. By this time, 3 months had passed since Rebecca and Russell had gone missing, and the condition of the bodies was severely deteriorated. Identification wasn't immediately possible, and forensic examination was necessary to confirm the victims' identities. Experts have confirmed, through dental records and DNA analysis, that the bodies belonged to Rebecca and Russell. The case was reclassified from a disappearance to a double murder. Investigators concluded that they had been attacked in the head at close range with a weapon. They was found wearing pajamas, suggesting they were likely attacked during the night or early morning while sleeping. It's strange when bodies are found deep in the forest, far from their homes. This area is difficult to access, and for a long time, the question arose, how could a stranger know about this place? The truth was later revealed. Tony's cousin, Dusty Hicks, was an accomplice. Dusty disclosed that Tony was part of a gang, which included several of his childhood friends. They often commit crimes, mainly by breaking into houses and stealing to unlawfully benefit from others' property. Until the Porter family's murders, the gang had no history of violent crimes. Dusty revealed that he, Tony, Wendy Friend, Tony's wife, and their son, Philip, were involved in the massacre. Investigators decided to examine their phone records. Suspicious messages were discovered between Tony, Wendy, Philip, and Dusty. On April 18, 2011, they were near the Porter's family house, but their devices were switched off a few hundred meters away from the farm. The suspects confessed during interrogation that a specific customer had offered them $100,000 to carry out a double murder. Tony, the oldest and most experienced among them, influenced Philip and the others to join the criminal plan, driven by the promise of money. According to their statements, they prepared by wrapping their hands in a special adhesive film to avoid leaving fingerprints. Before heading to the Porter's farm, they bought a can of bleach, which they later used to wipe away evidence at the crime scene. To disable the CCTV system, they cut the wires, triggering an alarm. After cutting through a fence, they entered the house through a window. Tony carried a weapon, while the others assisted him. He went into Rebecca and Russell's bedroom, brandished the weapon at them, who had awakened, and instructed the accomplices to restrain them using plastic ties. They were then abducted and taken away in a pickup truck to an isolated forest area. Rebecca and Russell were left near a cabin in the woods, where their bodies were later discovered. Philip, one of the suspects, disclosed that Tony and Dusty led them deeper into the forest. Approximately 10 minutes later, he heard the sound of weapons exploding, followed a few minutes later by another explosion, signaling the deaths of Rebecca and Russell. Their bodies were buried hastily in a makeshift grave. The perpetrators returned to the Porter's family home to clean up the crime scene and stole a computer containing footage from the CCTV cameras to eliminate incriminating evidence. The police focused on the person who ordered the crime, someone willing to pay $100,000 to kill 2 innocent people. Tony eventually revealed a name, Robert Campbell. It made sense to the investigators, as Robert, Russell's uncle, had more than one motive. He wanted revenge for being evicted, but there was something deeper. Russell and Rebecca knew a terrible secret about him, though the exact details were never revealed. Russell and Rebecca suspected that Robert was involved in illegal activities, specifically selling stolen equipment. They had gathered evidence and were planning to report him to the police. To prevent this, Robert turned to his friend Tony, who organized a group to carry out the murders. The entire gang was eventually arrested. Although Robert denied any involvement, insisting that he hadn't done it, the police dismissed his claims. The prosecutor charged all 5 individuals involved. Tony Friend admitted guilt in 2 counts of first-degree murder and received a life sentence without parole. Dusty Hicks was sentenced to 2 life terms. Wendy Friend also received a life sentence. Philip Friend cooperated with authorities, testifying against the others, which led to a reduced sentence. Robert Campbell went to trial, and despite the evidence being circumstantial, he was convicted of 2 counts of first-degree murder and sentenced to 2 life terms without parole. Even Robert's wife, Carolyn, faced potential prosecution for aiding him in committing perjury, but she ended her life before any charges could be filed.